We use only 10% of our brain. This is one of the most well-known and completely wrong myths we hear in everyday life. The claim that we only use 10% of our brain has been around for over a century. It sounds just intuitive enough to earn a place in pop culture. But brain scans tell a very different story. When scientists use tools like fMRI to observe brain activity, they find that nearly every part of the brain is active at different times, depending on what you're doing. Simple actions like walking or listening to music engage multiple areas, and during complex tasks like solving a puzzle or recalling a memory, even more regions light up. There's no massive section of your brain sitting idle. The myth likely stuck because it's appealing. It makes us feel like we have untapped potential just waiting to be unlocked. But it's based on a misunderstanding. Some parts of the brain are more specialized, responsible for vision, movement, or language, and not all are firing at once. That doesn't mean they're unused. It just means they're used as needed. What's more, the brain is one of the most energy-hungry organs in the body. It uses around 20% of your energy, even though it weighs just 2% of your total body mass. Evolution doesn't keep around expensive, useless tissue. So no, you're not stuck with 10% power. You're already using far more than you think, just not all at once, and that's exactly how it's meant to work. 5-second food rule. You drop a cookie on the floor, you glance around, count to 5, and pick it up. 5-second rule, you say, as if those few seconds somehow protect it from germs. It's a rule everyone seems to know, and most people secretly follow. But scientifically, it doesn't hold up. The idea behind the 5-second rule is simple. If food touches the floor for less than 5 seconds, it's still safe to eat. The assumption is that bacteria need time to crawl, to jump, to somehow transfer. But in reality, contamination is almost instant. Studies have shown that bacteria can transfer to food in less than a second, especially if the surface is dirty or moist. The type of food matters too. A cracker might pick up fewer microbes than a slice of watermelon, but both still get contaminated the moment they touch a germy surface. And it's not just about time, it's about what's already on the floor. If the floor is clean, the risk is low, no matter how long the food sits. But if it's teeming with bacteria, 5 seconds makes no difference. Germs don't need to warm up. They're already there. So where did the rule come from? It's not clear. Some trace it back to an old joke or a loose cultural idea that got passed around. Over time, it became a comforting way to justify eating something you really didn't want to throw away. It feels like a loophole. Science-ish enough to believe, harmless enough to repeat. But while your immune system can handle a lot, the 5-second rule is a myth. Bacteria don't carry stopwatches. They don't wait. If it hits the floor, it's a gamble, no matter how fast you are. Brain is just a computer. The brain is often compared to a computer. It's a neat analogy. Input, process, output make sense on the surface. But once you look closer, the comparison starts to fall apart. Computers follow fixed instructions. Every line of code tells the machine exactly what to do. But the human brain doesn't operate with clean lines of logic. It's messy, adaptive, and constantly rewiring itself. Two people can get the same input, a sentence, a sound, a smell, and react in completely different ways. That's not how machines work. Computers store data exactly as it was entered. Your vacation photo looks the same 10 years later. But your brain, it reshapes memories every time you recall them. Details blur, emotions shift, sometimes whole parts get rewritten. If the brain were a hard drive, it would be the most unreliable storage system in the world. But that's actually part of what makes it powerful. Another key difference: computers don't feel. They don't get tired, bored, anxious, or inspired. The brain is affected by hormones, body signals, sleep, social cues, things that aren't part of any software system. Emotions aren't just noise in the machine. They help guide decisions and learning. In fact, damage to emotional centers in the brain often makes rational thinking worse, not better. Even the structure is different. Computers have centralized processors, but the brain is a network. Millions of neurons firing in patterns with no single command center running the show. The brain equals computer myth simplifies something far more complex. It's useful in conversation, but not in science. The truth is, your brain isn't like a computer. It's more like an orchestra, coordinated, unpredictable, emotional, and alive. And no two are wired exactly the same. You can catch up on lost sleep. After a late night or a week of poor sleep, it's tempting to believe you can just catch up over the weekend. Sleep in for a few extra hours and everything balances out. But that's not exactly how sleep works. Sleep isn't stored like money in a bank. You can't save it up in advance, and you can't fully pay off a running sleep debt by simply sleeping more later. Missing sleep takes a toll on your body and brain, one that's not always easy to reverse. When you don't get enough rest, the effects start quickly. Reaction times slow down, focus fades, and memory becomes less reliable. Over time, chronic sleep loss can increase the risk of heart disease, diabetes, and depression. While 1 or 2 nights of short sleep can often be recovered from with a longer rest, consistent sleep deprivation leads to deeper disruptions in your internal systems, especially your circadian rhythm, which keeps your body clock in sync. If you sleep 5 or 6 hours a night all week and then try to make up for it by sleeping 10 hours on Saturday, your body might feel slightly better, but your sleep quality and alertness may not fully return to normal. Oversleeping on the weekend can also throw off your rhythm, making it harder to fall asleep on time when the work week starts again. The most effective way to stay well rested is to get consistent, good quality sleep each night. That doesn't mean perfect sleep every time, but aiming for a steady schedule helps your body function the way it's designed to. Occasional recovery sleep is fine. It can help in the short term, but it's not a long-term solution. Regular rest is what your body actually needs. Reading in dim light ruins your eyes. At some point, almost everyone's been told not to read in dim light because it will ruin their eyes. It sounds reasonable. Squinting at a book under a weak lamp feels uncomfortable. But while it might cause temporary strain, it doesn't cause permanent damage. When you read in low light, your eyes work harder to focus. That can lead to symptoms like dryness, tiredness, or mild headaches. But these effects are short-term. They don't reshape your eyes or alter your vision in any lasting way. Once you rest your eyes or move to better lighting, those symptoms fade. The idea that dim lighting permanently harms your vision has been around for generations. It likely started when eye strain was poorly understood, and people assumed that discomfort meant damage. But modern research shows that your eyes are more adaptable than they seem. They constantly adjust to different levels of brightness without injury. Even in low light, your pupils widen to let in more light, and other muscles subtly shift to help you focus. These adjustments are natural, and while they may lead to fatigue over time, they're not dangerous. It's similar to how your legs might get sore from walking a long distance. It's effort, not harm. That said, good lighting still helps. It can reduce eye fatigue and make reading more comfortable, especially for long periods. But choosing to read a few chapters in bed with a soft lamp won't ruin your eyes. So while dim lighting might make your eyes work harder for a while, it doesn't leave a mark. It's more about comfort than damage. your vision isn't at risk from that bedtime novel under a warm bedside glow. Different tongue areas taste different flavors. If you've ever seen a diagram of the tongue in a textbook, you might remember it. Sweet at the tip, salty on the sides, bitter in the back, sour somewhere in between. It's called the tongue map, and it's been printed, taught, and memorized for decades. But here's the twist. It's wrong. The idea that different parts of the tongue detect different tastes comes from a misinterpretation of a study from the early 1900s. A German scientist published research showing small differences in sensitivity across the tongue. But when the data was translated and simplified for teaching, it turned into something much more rigid. A literal map that assigned each taste to a specific region. That oversimplification became the myth we all grew up with. In reality, all taste buds can detect all 5 basic tastes: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. These taste buds are spread throughout the tongue, and even in other parts of the mouth and throat. While some areas might be slightly more sensitive to a certain flavor, the differences are tiny. Your whole tongue is working together to detect taste. Modern neuroscience confirms this. Taste is a complex experience. It's not just about the tongue. It involves smell, texture, temperature, and even expectations. The tongue map might look tidy in a diagram, but it doesn't match how your brain processes flavor. So the next time someone points to the tip of their tongue and says, "That's where sweet lives," you'll know better. Taste isn't divided up like territories. It's a full mouth, full sense experience, far messier and far more interesting than any old map suggests. Humans evolved from monkeys. The phrase "humans evolved from monkeys" gets repeated a lot, but it's not quite accurate. It oversimplifies how evolution works and leads to some common misunderstandings about human origins. Humans didn't evolve from the monkeys we see today. Instead, humans and modern monkeys share a common ancestor, a species that lived millions of years ago and gave rise to multiple evolutionary branches. One of those branches eventually led to us. Another led to the monkeys and apes still living today. Think of it like a family tree. You and your cousins didn't come from each other. You both came from a shared grandparent. In the same way, humans and other primates are more like evolutionary cousins than one being descended directly from the other. The common ancestor we share with modern monkeys was likely a small, tree-dwelling primate that lived around 25 to 30 million years ago. Over time, different populations of its descendants adapted to different environments. Some became the various types of monkeys we know today, while others evolved into apes, and one specific branch of apes eventually evolved into early humans. Fossils and genetic evidence show that humans are most closely related to chimpanzees and bonobos, but even these are not our ancestors. We share about 98 to 99% of our DNA with them, but that similarity points to a shared past, not a direct line. Human evolution is marked by gradual changes, walking upright, developing larger brains, and using tools. These traits didn't suddenly appear. They developed over millions of years in response to shifting environments and survival needs. So while humans and monkeys are connected through evolution, we didn't come from monkeys, we came from the same ancient roots. Understanding that distinction helps make sense of how all life is interconnected without confusing the direction of evolution. Your fingerprints are completely unique. For over a century, fingerprints have been treated like biological snowflakes, completely unique, impossible to duplicate, and foolproof for identification. It's why they're used in police work, passports, phones, and locks. But the idea that your fingerprints are completely unique isn't as airtight as it sounds. Yes, fingerprints are incredibly detailed. The ridges, loops, and whorls formed in the womb are shaped by genetics and environment, creating patterns that are very unlikely to repeat. But very unlikely is not the same as impossible. The claim that no two fingerprints have ever been alike across all of history is more belief than proof. There is no scientific study that has examined every fingerprint on Earth. In fact, fingerprint analysis has come under scrutiny in recent years. While it's still a useful tool, forensic experts now admit that it's not infallible. There have been documented cases where fingerprint evidence led to wrongful arrests and convictions, later overturned by DNA. This doesn't mean fingerprints are useless, just that they aren't perfect. Even identical twins who share the same DNA have different fingerprints, but not wildly different. Their prints often share enough features to make them harder to tell apart than most people realize. And in massive populations, the chance of partial fingerprint matches increases. So while your fingerprints are highly distinctive, calling them completely unique is a stretch. It's a myth born from confidence in early forensic science, and it stuck because it sounded definitive. But science rarely deals in absolutes. Fingerprint technology is still valuable, just not flawless. It's one piece of the puzzle, not a golden key. And like most things that seem too certain, completely unique turns out to be a bit of a myth. Opposites attract. The saying opposites attract is one of the most popular ideas about relationships. It suggests that people with contrasting personalities, like the introvert and the extrovert, or the planner and the spontaneous one, are naturally drawn to each other. But while it makes for great movie plots, research tells a different story. Psychological studies consistently show that people are more likely to form lasting relationships with others who are similar to them, not wildly different. That similarity can show up in personality, values, communication style, or life goals. It's called the similarity attraction effect, and it's been observed in friendships, romantic relationships, and even workplace dynamics. The idea that opposites attract might come from noticing how different traits can seem exciting or complementary at first. For example, someone who's shy might find a bold, outgoing partner refreshing, or a risk taker might enjoy the calm balance of a cautious partner. In the short term, those differences can feel like a good match. But over time, significant differences in how people approach life, like handling money, conflict, or parenting, can lead to tension. That doesn't mean everyone needs to be exactly alike. Relationships still benefit from a balance of perspectives, but the foundation tends to work best when partners share core traits, like openness, emotional stability, or mutual interests. These commonalities make communication easier, reduce misunderstandings, and increase long-term satisfaction. The myth that opposites attract sounds exciting because it challenges what we expect. But in reality, shared values, habits, and outlooks often matter more. Relationships built on common ground tend to be more stable, not because they lack differences, but because they're aligned where it counts. The science suggests it's not about finding your opposite. It's about finding your match. Microwaves give you cancer. Some people worry that using a microwave could increase their risk of cancer. It's a common fear, usually based on the idea that microwave ovens use radiation, and radiation sounds dangerous. But not all radiation is the same. Microwaves work by using a type of non-ionizing radiation. That means it doesn't have enough energy to damage your DNA, which is the main way cancer starts. Instead, microwave radiation causes water molecules in food to vibrate. generating heat and warming the food from the inside out. It doesn't make the food radioactive, and it doesn't change the structure of the ingredients in a harmful way. The confusion often comes from mixing up different kinds of radiation. Ionizing radiation, like X-rays or ultraviolet light, can damage cells and DNA. But the kind used in microwave ovens is much weaker and not in the same category. It's closer to the radio waves that power your phone or Wi-Fi than anything harmful. Microwaves are also designed with safety in mind. The metal casing and mesh screen on the door prevent radiation from leaking out. As long as the microwave is working properly and the door seals correctly, there's no risk of exposure beyond the inside of the oven. Claims about microwaved food being less nutritious have also been studied. Cooking in a microwave may actually help preserve some nutrients better than boiling or frying, simply because it cooks food faster and uses less water. So while the word radiation can sound alarming, the kind used in microwaves isn't the dangerous type. It heats your food efficiently and safely, without increasing your cancer risk. The technology may feel a little mysterious, but it's well understood and widely tested. Alcohol kills brain cells. Alcohol doesn't exactly have a reputation for being brain-friendly. For years, people have repeated the idea that every drink you take kills off brain cells. It's a simple, scary image, but it's not quite accurate. The truth is, moderate alcohol consumption doesn't actually kill brain cells. That myth likely comes from early studies that misunderstood how alcohol affects the brain. When you drink, alcohol acts as a depressant. It slows down activity in the central nervous system, which can temporarily impair things like coordination, memory, and judgment. But those effects are mostly due to how alcohol interacts with neurotransmitters, chemical messengers in your brain, not because it's destroying neurons. Now, that doesn't mean alcohol has no impact. Chronic heavy drinking over long periods can definitely harm the brain. It can shrink certain brain regions, especially the frontal lobe, which is involved in decision-making and self-control. But again, this damage comes from long-term exposure and nutrient deficiencies, not because alcohol directly kills brain cells on contact. Another factor is how alcohol affects brain development. For teenagers and young adults, whose brains are still maturing, regular drinking can interfere with critical processes like memory formation and emotional regulation. So while it's not about killing cells outright, alcohol can still disrupt how the brain grows and functions. In extreme cases, alcohol abuse can lead to conditions like Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, often called wet brain, which is tied to a lack of vitamin B1. This condition involves serious memory problems. But even here, it's not that cells are being killed by alcohol alone. It's a combination of poor nutrition and prolonged misuse. So, while the image of alcohol zapping brain cells might be catchy, the reality is more about interference than destruction. Moderate drinking doesn't kill neurons, but that doesn't mean it's harmless either. You can't fold paper more than 7 times. It's one of those oddly specific rules you probably heard in school. You can't fold a piece of paper in half more than 7 times. Doesn't matter how hard you try. 7 is the limit. But while this myth sounds mathematical, it's not a law of physics. It's just a challenge of scale. The myth likely started because, with a standard sheet of paper, folding gets hard fast. Each fold doubles the thickness and shrinks the usable area. By the 7th fold, you're pushing against a dense, stiff wedge of layered paper. So for a regular sheet, yes, it feels impossible. But that doesn't mean it is impossible. In 2002, a high school student named Brittany Gallivan actually broke the myth. She used a long roll of thin toilet paper and folded it 12 times in one direction. and did the math to prove exactly how and why it worked. Her formula showed that it's not about the number 7, it's about the ratio of thickness to length. So why do most people still believe the 7-fold rule? Because with normal paper, it's practically true. The paper gets too thick, too fast, and our hands aren't strong enough. But with thinner material, or industrial tools, the fold count climbs quickly. In fact, machines have folded paper dozens of times in laboratory conditions. This myth sticks because it blends challenge with mystery. It feels like a limit you can almost beat, but never quite do. The truth is, paper folding isn't bound by some cosmic rule, just by space, thickness, and effort. So no, 7 isn't the magic number. With the right paper and enough patience, you can fold far beyond that limit. One crease at a time. Your pupils dilate when you're attracted to someone. It's one of those romantic science facts that shows up in movies and psychology blogs. If someone's pupils dilate when they look at you, they must be into you. Attraction, desire, eye contact, all supposedly written right there in the size of the black dot in their eye. But is it really that simple? Not exactly. Yes, pupil dilation can occur when someone is aroused or emotionally stimulated. It's controlled by the autonomic nervous system, the same system that regulates your heartbeat and breathing. But attraction is just one of many triggers. Pupils also dilate in response to low light, stress, surprise, cognitive effort, or even certain medications and caffeine. In fact, your pupils are constantly adjusting to lighting conditions and internal states. If you're in a dim room or looking at a screen, your pupils might expand simply to let in more light. And if someone's thinking hard or feeling nervous, that can also cause dilation, whether they're attracted or not. The myth likely stuck around because it feels intuitive. Attraction is tied to eye contact, and pupils are part of the eyes, so the connection seems obvious. Plus, it adds a layer of hidden meaning to social interactions. But relying on pupil size to read someone's feelings is unreliable at best. Also, the changes in dilation are often subtle, fractions of a millimeter, and not easily noticeable without close observation or controlled lighting. So while pupil dilation can coincide with attraction, it's not a clear signal. It's like trying to guess someone's feelings from their pulse. Maybe helpful, maybe not, and definitely not conclusive. Your eyes might be windows to the soul, but your pupils, they're just doing their job. Your heart stops when you sneeze. There's a popular idea that when you sneeze, your heart skips a beat, or even stops entirely, for a brief moment. It's one of those strange biological facts people pass around like trivia. But the truth, your heart doesn't stop, not even close. Sneezing is a dramatic reflex. Your body builds pressure in your lungs, your eyes squeeze shut, and a blast of air shoots out at high speed. It feels intense, so it's no surprise people think something serious is happening inside. And technically, your heartbeat can change slightly. But that's not the same as stopping. Here's what actually happens. During a sneeze, there's a moment of increased pressure in your chest. That pressure can affect blood flow and briefly change your heart rate. Often, the rhythm slows down slightly due to a reflex called the vagal response. But the heart doesn't pause or halt. It simply adjusts to the temporary change in pressure. In fact, your heart changes pace all the time. It speeds up when you stand up, slows when you exhale, and responds constantly to what your body's doing. The tiny variation that happens during a sneeze is just one of many automatic adjustments. And it's completely normal. So where did this myth come from? Probably from the physical jolt of sneezing. paired with the momentary silence that follows. Some people even say, "Bless you," as if you've narrowly escaped death. But the heart-stopping idea is more dramatic than biological. Your sneeze might shake your whole body, but your heart keeps right on beating. No skip, no stop. Just another myth that sounds intense, but doesn't hold up under pressure. Sitting too close to the TV ruins your eyes. For decades, kids have been told not to sit too close to the television because it'll ruin their eyes. It's the kind of warning that's stuck, passed down from living rooms to classrooms like a household rule. But medically, it doesn't hold up. There's no evidence that sitting close to a screen causes permanent eye damage. The idea likely started in the 1960s, when some early colour TVs emitted higher levels of radiation than they should have. That problem was quickly corrected, but the warning stuck around long after the technology improved. Today's screens, whether televisions, tablets or monitors, are built to be safe, even up close. What sitting too close can cause is temporary eye strain. Your eyes have to work harder to focus, especially if you're staring at one area for a long time. That can lead to headaches, dry eyes or fatigue, but it doesn't damage the eye itself. Kids often sit close to screens not because they're damaging their vision, but because their eyes naturally focus better up close. In some cases, if a child always sits close, it might be a sign they're nearsighted. But the screen isn't causing the problem. It's just revealing it. Eye strain can happen at any distance if you're not taking breaks. The 20-20-20 rule helps. Every 20 minutes, look at something 20 feet away for at least 20 seconds. It gives your eyes time to reset and relax. So, while it's more comfortable to sit at a reasonable distance, especially with a large screen, you're not hurting your eyes by sitting too close. The discomfort is real, but the damage is a myth. The key is balance, not fear of proximity. You must stretch before working out. You've probably heard it before. Don't even think about hitting the gym unless you've stretched first. For years, it's been treated as common sense. Stretching, we're told, is the go-to way to avoid injuries and loosen up your muscles before a workout. But that advice leaves out an important detail. Not all stretching is the same, and not all of it is helpful before exercise. The idea usually refers to static stretching, the kind where you hold a muscle in a fixed position for 20 to 30 seconds. Think reaching for your toes or pulling your arm across your chest and holding it. While this type of stretching can improve flexibility over time, doing it cold, before a workout, might not be the best choice. In fact, research shows that static stretching before exercise can temporarily reduce muscle strength and performance, especially for high-intensity activities like sprinting or lifting. Instead, dynamic stretching is what actually prepares your body to move. This involves controlled, active movements that warm up your muscles and increase your range of motion. Leg swings, arm circles, walking lunges. These mimic the types of motions your workout will demand. They get your blood flowing and your muscles ready to work. That's not to say static stretching has no place. It's useful after a workout, when your muscles are warm and more receptive to flexibility gains. But when it comes to getting your body ready to perform, dynamic movement tends to be more effective and better aligned with what your muscles need in the moment. So while the message to stretch before exercise isn't entirely wrong, it's incomplete. What really matters is how you stretch and when. Bats are blind. The phrase "blind as a bat" gets thrown around all the time, but it couldn't be more wrong. Bats aren't blind. In fact, many of them see surprisingly well. Bats belong to a large and diverse group of mammals, and different species have different types of vision. Some bats, especially fruit bats, have excellent eyesight. These bats are active during twilight or nighttime hours, and they rely on their vision to find fruit, navigate trees, and avoid obstacles. Their large eyes help them see in low light, similar to how a cat's eyes work. Other bats, like many insect-eating species, also have functioning eyes, but they rely more heavily on a system called echolocation. This is a kind of biological sonar. The bat sends out high-pitched sounds and listens for the echoes bouncing off objects around them. This allows them to see with sound, detecting tiny insects in complete darkness with incredible accuracy. But this doesn't mean they can't see. Their eyes are still working, they're just not the primary tool they use for hunting. The myth likely stuck because echolocation is such a strange and impressive ability. People assumed that if bats were using sound to navigate, it must mean their eyes don't work. But evolution doesn't tend to get rid of useful features. Bats have both systems, vision and echolocation, and they use whichever works best depending on the situation. Even among the echolocating bats, many can detect shapes, movement, and even ultraviolet light. They might not see the world the way humans do, but that's not the same as being blind. So the next time someone uses the phrase blind as a bat, it's worth remembering that bats aren't flying around in total darkness. They're navigating with a full set of tools, and vision is definitely one of them. Antibiotics kill all germs in your body. When you're sick and prescribed antibiotics, it's easy to think of them as all-purpose germ killers, like microscopic exterminators wiping out every harmful bug in your system. But the truth is more complicated. Antibiotics don't kill all germs, and they definitely don't work on everything. For starters, antibiotics only work against bacteria, not viruses. That means if you've got the flu, a cold, or COVID-19, antibiotics won't help. These illnesses are caused by viruses, and taking antibiotics for them won't make you better. In fact, it can do more harm than good. But even when fighting a real bacterial infection, antibiotics aren't surgical in their precision. They don't just target the bad bacteria making you sick, they also wipe out helpful bacteria your body depends on. Your gut, for example, is full of good microbes that help with digestion, immunity, and overall balance. A course of antibiotics can disrupt that ecosystem, leading to side effects like stomach issues or yeast infections. And not all bacteria are affected equally. Some are naturally resistant, and others evolve to survive antibiotic attacks, especially if medications are overused or misused. This leads to antibiotic resistance, where infections become harder to treat over time because the bacteria adapt. The myth that antibiotics kill all germs sounds like strength, a total reset for your system, but it's misleading. These drugs are powerful, yes, but specific, and they come with trade-offs. So the next time someone says antibiotics will clear out everything, it's worth remembering, not all germs are bad, and not all germs can be killed that easily. Use antibiotics wisely, because the more you understand them, the better they work. Shaving makes hair grow back thicker. It's a common belief. If you shave your hair, it grows back thicker, darker, and faster. But that's not how hair works. The idea likely comes from what people notice right after shaving. When hair starts to grow back, it can feel rougher or look darker than before. But that's not because it changed. It's because of how the hair is cut. Shaving slices the hair straight across, leaving a blunt edge. That edge feels stubbly and coarse as it grows out. But the hair itself hasn't actually become thicker or denser. Hair grows from follicles under your skin, and shaving doesn't affect them. The thickness, colour, and speed of your hair growth are determined by your genetics and hormones, not by your razor. Whether you're shaving your legs, face, or head, the razor is only trimming the visible part of the hair, not influencing what happens beneath the skin. The illusion of thickness also comes from the contrast between new stubble and the smoother skin around it. Freshly shaved hair hasn't yet been exposed to sunlight or natural wear, so it can appear darker too. But again, that's just appearance. It's not a real change in the hair's structure. Multiple studies have tested this idea over the years, and none have found that shaving changes hair's thickness, growth rate, or color. If it did, we'd see people with visibly thicker eyebrows, arms, or other areas after regular shaving. And we don't. So while it might feel like your hair grows back thicker, it's just a trick of texture and timing. The razor's not changing your biology, it's just giving your hair a blunt edge. Cracking your knuckles causes arthritis. Knuckle cracking happens when you stretch or bend your fingers in a way that changes the pressure in your joints. Inside those joints is a fluid that helps reduce friction. When you move the joint suddenly, that pressure change causes gases in the fluid to form bubbles. The popping sound is just those bubbles collapsing or bursting, not bones grinding or ligaments snapping. The myth likely exists because the sound is sharp and unpleasant. It feels like you're doing something damaging, but the action doesn't harm the joint. Researchers have looked at this for decades. One of the most well-known informal studies involved a doctor who cracked the knuckles on one hand for over 60 years and left the other hand alone. Neither hand developed arthritis. More formal studies have confirmed similar results. There's no significant difference in arthritis rates between people who crack their knuckles regularly and those who don't. That said, knuckle cracking can sometimes cause temporary swelling or reduce grip strength, but these effects aren't permanent, and they're not the same thing as arthritis. Arthritis is a condition where the joints become inflamed, often due to wear and tear or autoimmune issues. It doesn't come from popping your knuckles. It comes from much deeper biological processes that have nothing to do with joint pressure changes. So while knuckle cracking might annoy the people around you, it's not damaging your joints the way people think. That pop is harmless gas, not the start of something serious. Goldfish have 3-second memories. The idea that goldfish only have a 3-second memory gets repeated so often, it's practically become a joke. But it's not true. Not even close. Goldfish aren't forgetful little swimmers with no sense of time. In fact, their memory span is much longer than a few seconds. It can last for weeks, and in some cases, even months. Scientists have tested this using simple but effective methods, often involving food. In one experiment, researchers trained goldfish to expect food in a specific part of their tank at the sound of a buzzer. Not only did the fish swim to that spot every time they heard the sound, but they also continued to do it long after the training stopped. That doesn't happen with a 3-second memory. That's learned behavior, and it sticks. Goldfish have even been trained to navigate mazes, recognize patterns, and remember routines. Pet owners often notice that their goldfish will swim to the top of the tank when it's feeding time or react differently to different people. These are signs of memory and basic learning ability. The myth likely stuck around because goldfish aren't expressive animals. They don't wag tails or make noise, so we tend to assume they're simple or unaware. But memory isn't about facial expressions. It's about patterns of behavior over time. And goldfish clearly have those. Memory also helps goldfish survive. In the wild, they use it to avoid predators, find food, and recognize changes in their environment. Even in a tank, their memory helps them adjust to daily routines and repeated cues. So while it's funny to imagine a fish forgetting everything every few seconds, the science shows that goldfish are more capable than we give them credit for. Their memory isn't short, it's surprisingly smart. You swallow 8 spiders a year in your sleep. At some point, you've probably heard the claim that people swallow about 8 spiders a year in their sleep. It sounds gross, a little creepy, and completely made up. There's no scientific evidence behind the idea. It didn't come from a research study or a medical report. In fact, it likely started as an example of how easily misinformation can spread. Someone invented the claim to show that people will believe almost anything if it's repeated enough. Ironically, the myth became more famous than the point it was trying to prove. But beyond its origin, the idea doesn't hold up for several simple reasons. First, humans don't sleep with their mouths wide open for long periods, and even if they did, the vibrations from breathing, snoring, and slight movements would likely scare a spider away, not draw it in. Spiders are generally cautious creatures. They don't go wandering into places with warm, noisy air and unpredictable motion. Second, most spiders want nothing to do with humans. They're not curious about our mouths. They prefer quiet, hidden corners where they won't be disturbed. The idea that a spider would walk across your face, down into your mouth, and just wait there to be swallowed goes against how they behave. Also, people tend to wake up when something touches their face, especially something light and ticklish like a spider. Even in deep sleep, the brain stays alert to certain kinds of sensory input. No reputable entomologist, someone who studies insects and spiders, believes this myth is real. It's just a piece of trivia that sounds unsettling enough to stick in your head. But there's no need to worry. Your sleep isn't a spider buffet. It's just another myth that spread because it felt too weird to ignore. Eating before bed makes you fat. A lot of people believe that eating right before bed automatically leads to weight gain. It sounds logical. Eat, lie down, and let the calories turn straight into fat. But the truth isn't that simple. Weight gain doesn't depend on the time of day you eat. It depends on how much you eat over time compared to how much energy your body uses. In other words, your total calorie intake matters more than the clock. When you eat something, your body starts digesting it immediately, whether it's 8 a.m. or 10 p.m. Your metabolism doesn't suddenly shut down when you go to sleep. It may slow slightly, but it still processes food efficiently overnight. So where did the myth come from? Part of it may be behavioral. Late-night eating often includes snacks that are higher in sugar, salt, or fat, like chips, cookies, or fast food. These are easy to overeat, especially if you're tired or distracted. It's not the timing, it's the extra calories that make the difference. Some studies have shown a connection between late-night eating and weight gain, but usually in people who consistently overeat at night. For example, skipping meals during the day, then binging before bed. That kind of pattern can throw off hunger cues and lead to long-term overeating. There's also the sleep angle. Eating too close to bedtime can affect sleep quality for some people, especially if the meal is large or spicy. Poor sleep can, in turn, affect hormone levels that regulate hunger, and that can influence weight gain indirectly. But the food itself? It doesn't know what time it is. Your body doesn't store calories differently just because the sun went down. It's about what and how much you eat overall, not when you eat it. Lightning never strikes the same place twice. You've probably heard the saying, lightning never strikes the same place twice. It's catchy, but completely false. Lightning actually does strike the same place more than once, and it happens more often than most people realize. In fact, tall, pointed, or isolated structures are frequent targets. The Empire State Building, for example, gets struck by lightning around 20 to 25 times every single year. Not just twice, dozens of times. Here's why it happens. Lightning is a discharge of electricity that travels between clouds and the ground. It looks for the fastest, easiest path. Tall objects like towers, trees, and flagpoles provide a shorter route through the air. That makes them prime targets, again and again. Lightning also tends to return to places where conditions are favorable. If something has been hit before, it likely has the right shape, height, and surroundings to attract another strike. The atmosphere doesn't care if a place has already been hit. Electricity just follows the path of least resistance. The myth probably comes from the way we use the phrase in everyday conversation. People say it to suggest that a rare event won't happen twice. But in science, rarity has nothing to do with location. If conditions are right, lightning can and will strike the same place again. This is why important buildings often have lightning rods installed at the top. These rods are specifically designed to attract lightning and safely redirect the energy into the ground. It's a controlled way to handle what nature repeats. So while the saying might sound comforting or clever, it doesn't match reality. Lightning is unpredictable in many ways, but returning to the same spot is not unusual, especially if that spot makes it easy. Sugar makes kids hyper. Parents have been blaming sugar for hyperactive kids for decades. Birthday parties, Halloween, or a piece of cake after dinner. It's often followed by the idea that sugar made them bounce off the walls, but research doesn't support that claim. Multiple scientific studies have tested whether sugar causes hyperactivity in children. The results have been surprisingly consistent. There's no measurable link between sugar intake and increased activity levels. Even in studies where kids were given large amounts of sugar, their behavior didn't change compared to those given a placebo. In some experiments, the only difference was what the parents believed their kids had eaten. That belief plays a big role. If a parent expects sugar to make their child hyper, they're more likely to interpret normal excitement as over-the-top behavior. This is called the expectancy effect, where perception is shaped by what someone expects to see. Kids often get sugar during exciting events, like parties, holidays, or playdates. These settings naturally lead to more energy, running around, and loud voices. Sugar just happens to be there at the same time. It's easy to assume a cause and effect, even when there isn't one. Now, this doesn't mean sugar is harmless. Too much can affect things like mood, focus, and energy crashes later on. It can also contribute to long-term health issues if overconsumed. But in the short term, it doesn't seem to trigger a spike in hyperactivity. Still, the myth persists, partly because it's been repeated so often, and partly because it feels like a neat explanation for behavior that's otherwise hard to manage. But scientifically, sugar doesn't cause kids to lose control. The excitement usually comes from what's going on around them, not what's in their snack. Coffee stunts your growth. For years, kids have been warned that drinking coffee will stunt their growth. It's one of those classic lines, right up there with "sit up straight" or "don't run with scissors." But despite how often it's said, there's no scientific evidence to support it. Coffee contains caffeine, a natural stimulant that affects the central nervous system. It can make you feel more alert, increase heart rate, and temporarily reduce tiredness. But it doesn't interfere with the growth plates in bones or stop the body from developing normally. Growth is mainly influenced by genetics, nutrition, sleep, and overall health, not by whether someone drinks coffee. The myth likely started decades ago when some early studies linked caffeine to lower bone density. But those studies didn't tell the whole story. Later research showed that the real issue wasn't the caffeine itself. It was that people who drank more caffeine often got less calcium in their diets. Calcium is important for building strong bones, especially in children and teens. But caffeine doesn't block growth. At most, it has a very mild effect on how the body handles calcium, and even that can be offset by getting enough from food or supplements. That's why coffee isn't off limits for growing teens. It just needs to be part of a balanced diet. Of course, too much caffeine can still cause problems like jitteriness, poor sleep, or upset stomachs, especially in younger people. But that's a short-term effect, not a long-term growth issue. In short, coffee isn't a growth blocker. It's just a drink with a strong reputation and a few misunderstood side effects. As long as it's consumed in moderation, it won't make you any shorter. It just might keep you up a little later. The Great Wall of China is visible from space. It's one of the most popular space-related facts people love to repeat. The Great Wall of China is the only man-made object visible from space. But that statement doesn't hold up. First, it depends on what you mean by space. If you're talking about low Earth orbit, where the International Space Station orbits, the wall is sometimes visible, but it's not easy to spot. Astronauts say it's very difficult to see with the naked eye, even under perfect lighting conditions. That's because the wall is relatively narrow, and its color blends in with the natural landscape. The idea that it stands out clearly from space came long before satellites or space travel. It dates back to early speculation, long before anyone had been above the atmosphere to check. Once astronauts actually started going into orbit, they quickly debunked the myth. From that high up, large cities, roads, and even airports are more noticeable than the Great Wall. And if you're talking about the moon, where the myth often gets exaggerated, the wall is absolutely not visible. From that distance, no man-made structure can be seen with the naked eye. Earth just looks like a blue and white sphere with continents and weather patterns, but not individual buildings or walls. This myth sticks around because it feels impressive. The Great Wall is one of the largest construction projects in history, stretching over 13,000 miles, so it's natural to assume it would be visible from high above. But in reality, visibility from space is about contrast and size, not just length, and the wall doesn't stand out enough to be seen easily from orbit. It's an incredible human achievement, but not the landmark you're spotting from space. That view belongs more to cities, highways, and bright lights than to ancient stone. Touching a baby bird makes the mother abandon it. It's something many people are told as kids. If you touch a baby bird, the mother will smell your scent and abandon it. It's meant to protect the animal, but the science doesn't back it up. Most birds have a very limited sense of smell. They don't rely on scent to recognize their chicks. Instead, they use sight, sound, and location. So even if a human touches a baby bird, the parents aren't likely to notice, let alone reject it because of it. The myth probably started as a way to keep children from interfering with wildlife. Baby birds found on the ground often look helpless, and people assume they've been abandoned. But, in many cases, the bird is a fledgling, old enough to leave the nest, but still learning to fly. The parents are usually nearby, keeping watch and continuing to feed it. Even in situations where a nestling, a younger chick not yet ready to leave the nest, falls or is disturbed, returning it to the nest is usually safe. Most bird species will continue caring for their young, even after brief human contact. Their parental instincts are strong, and they won't walk away from their chicks just because something smells unfamiliar. Still, handling baby birds should be kept to a minimum, not because of scent rejection, but to avoid unnecessary stress or injury. If you do find a grounded fledgling, the best thing to do is often to leave it alone unless it's clearly in danger. If you're unsure, contacting a local wildlife rehab center is a better choice than acting on old advice. Birds may seem fragile, but they're not easily fooled by a touch. The idea that a single interaction will make a parent give up on its chick is a myth. not how nature works. You lose most of your heat through your head. You've probably heard that you lose most of your body heat through your head. It's the kind of advice that shows up in winter. Wear a hat, or you'll freeze. But the truth is, that idea isn't supported by how the body actually works. Heat loss happens through any part of the body that's exposed. If you go outside with only your head uncovered, then yes, you'll lose more heat through your head. But that's because the rest of you is bundled up. It's not that your head is some kind of special heat vent. It's just the part that's left unprotected. The myth likely started with a military study from the 1950s, where volunteers wore cold weather gear that covered everything except their heads. Naturally, most heat loss occurred there. But under normal conditions, the head only accounts for about 7 to 10% of your body's surface area. That means it contributes about the same percentage to total heat loss, unless it's the only part exposed. What makes the head feel more important is how sensitive it is. You're more likely to notice temperature changes on your face or scalp. It also doesn't have much fat insulation, and blood vessels run close to the skin, so it can cool down quickly, giving the impression that it's where the heat escapes first. Still, if you went out wearing just shorts and a hat, you'd lose far more heat from your arms and legs than from your head. The key factor isn't the body part, it's what's covered and what's not. So while wearing a hat in winter is still a good idea, it's not because your head leaks most of your body heat. It's just another piece of the puzzle, like sleeves, gloves, and everything else. You can sweat out toxins. It's a popular idea. Sit in a sauna, go for a long run, or do hot yoga, and you'll sweat out the toxins in your body. It sounds appealing, but that's not how the human body works. Sweat is your body's natural cooling system. When your internal temperature rises, your sweat glands release fluid, mostly water, with small amounts of salt, urea, and electrolytes. It helps regulate heat, not remove harmful substances. The idea that sweating can flush out toxins is a misunderstanding of what sweat is actually for. Toxins, like alcohol, drugs, or byproducts from food, are filtered by your liver and kidneys. These organs break down waste and send it out through urine or stool. That's their job. Sweat plays only a tiny, almost negligible role in removing waste. If your body relied on sweat to detox, you'd be in serious trouble. Some people feel better after sweating, especially during exercise. That's real, but it's more about the release of endorphins, improved circulation, and the psychological effects of physical effort, not the elimination of toxins through your skin. Medical studies have shown that even in extreme conditions, sweat contains only trace amounts of anything toxic. You'd have to sweat gallons to even approach what your kidneys clear in a single bathroom break. And for people with kidney or liver problems, sweating doesn't offer a backup plan. The body still relies on its internal filtration systems. That doesn't mean sweating is bad. It's a healthy part of how your body maintains balance. But it's not a detox method. If you're looking to support your body's natural detox process, drinking enough water, eating well, and getting regular sleep does far more than any amount of sweating ever will. Carrots improve night vision. The idea that carrots improve night vision has been around for generations. Parents say it, cartoons repeat it, and it sounds just believable enough to stick. But while carrots are healthy, they won't turn you into a superhero who can see in the dark. Carrots contain beta-carotene, which the body converts into vitamin A. Vitamin A is essential for maintaining healthy vision, particularly a part of the eye called the retina. Within the retina are light-sensitive cells that help us see in low-light conditions. Without enough vitamin A, those cells can't function properly, and night vision gets worse. So, in that sense, carrots do support vision, up to a point. If someone has a vitamin A deficiency, eating more carrots can help restore normal eyesight, including in the dark. But if your vitamin A levels are already normal, eating extra carrots won't give you enhanced night vision. There's a limit to how much the body can use. The myth gained extra traction during World War II. The British Royal Air Force spread the story that their pilots ate a lot of carrots to help them spot enemy planes at night. In reality, the military had developed radar technology but didn't want to reveal it. The carrot story worked as a convenient cover, and it stuck. Carrots are still great for you. They're full of nutrients, low in calories, and good for your overall health. But they won't give you special abilities in the dark. Once your body has what it needs, the rest just gets stored or flushed out. The real key to seeing well at night isn't eating more carrots. It's making sure your eyes are healthy overall, and avoiding bright lights before bed doesn't hurt either. If you touch a frog, you'll get warts. For generations, kids have been told not to touch frogs, or they'll get warts. It's the kind of warning that sounds believable, especially when looking at a bumpy toad. But warts don't come from frogs. They come from a virus. Warts are caused by the human papillomavirus, or HPV. It's a group of viruses that infect the top layer of human skin, often entering through tiny cuts or breaks. Once inside, the virus triggers the skin cells to grow faster, forming a rough, raised bump, a wart. It spreads through direct contact with infected skin or surfaces, not through animals. Frogs and toads may have lumpy, wart-like bumps on their skin, but those are natural parts of their bodies. They're not contagious. In fact, those bumps help protect them by secreting mild toxins that discourage predators. It's part of their defense system, not a sign of disease. This myth probably stuck around because of how frogs and toads look. Their skin appears bumpy, moist, and strange compared to most animals. That unfamiliar texture got associated with something humans consider unpleasant: warts. It became a simple visual shortcut that made sense at the time, even though it's not true. Touching a frog won't give you a skin infection, but it's still smart to wash your hands afterward. Not because of warts, but because frogs can carry bacteria like salmonella. It's also good for the frog. Handling them too much can stress them out or damage their sensitive skin. So while they might not be cuddly, frogs aren't spreading warts. They're just misunderstood. What gives you warts is a virus passed between humans, not a cold, bumpy toad hopping through the yard. Organic food is always healthier. A lot of people assume that organic food is always the healthier choice. It sounds straightforward. Fewer chemicals, more natural growing methods, better for your body. But the reality is more complex than a simple label. Organic food is defined by how it's produced. That usually means no synthetic pesticides, no artificial fertilizers, no genetically modified organisms, and often stricter animal welfare standards. These rules apply to how the food is grown or raised, not necessarily to the final nutritional content. When it comes to vitamins and minerals, studies have shown that organic and conventional foods are generally very similar. An organic apple doesn't have significantly more vitamin C than a non-organic one. In some cases, organic produce may have slightly higher antioxidant levels, but the difference isn't dramatic, and it doesn't apply across the board. What organic food does tend to offer is lower pesticide residue. But even conventionally grown foods are subject to safety limits set by health agencies, and most pesticide levels found on grocery store produce fall well below those limits. Washing fruits and vegetables helps reduce residue even further, no matter how they're grown. It's also worth noting that the word organic doesn't automatically mean healthy. Organic cookies, chips, and sodas still contain sugar, fat, and salt. The ingredients may be organically sourced, but the end product can still be highly processed. There are also environmental and ethical reasons why some people choose organic. But if the goal is better nutrition, the bigger impact usually comes from what you eat. More fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and lean proteins, not whether they're labeled organic. So while organic food can be part of a healthy diet, it's not a guarantee of better nutrition. The health value depends more on overall eating habits than on a single label. All bees die after stinging. It's a common belief that all bees die after they sting. The idea makes bee stings sound like a last resort, one final act of defense. But that only tells part of the story. The truth is, some bees die after stinging, but not all. This reaction is mostly limited to honeybees, and even then, only the workers. When a honeybee stings a person or other mammal, its stinger, barbed like a tiny harpoon, gets stuck in the skin. As the bee pulls away, the stinger tears from its body, along with part of its abdomen. That injury is fatal, but this only happens because mammal skin is thick and elastic. If a honeybee stings another insect, like a wasp or another bee, the stinger often doesn't get stuck. In those cases, the bee can sting and survive. So even within honeybees, death isn't guaranteed after every sting. And then there are other types of bees. Bumblebees, for example, have smooth stingers and can sting multiple times without harm. Same goes for many solitary bees, like carpenter bees. These species don't lose their stingers and have no problem defending themselves more than once. The confusion likely comes from how familiar honeybees are to most people. They're the ones we see in gardens and learn about in school, so their behavior tends to get generalized. But the world of bees is far more diverse. There are over 20,000 species of bees, and their stinging behavior varies widely. So while the sting and die rule applies to certain bees in specific situations, it's far from universal. Most bees aren't on a one-sting limit. They're more flexible, and in many cases, better equipped to defend themselves again if they need to. Multitasking makes you more productive. Juggling emails while sitting in a meeting, writing a report with music blasting, checking your phone in between tasks. Multitasking feels like a smart way to get more done, but it's not as productive as it seems. The human brain isn't built to focus on multiple complex tasks at once. What we call multitasking is actually just rapid task switching. Your attention flips back and forth, and each switch comes with a mental cost. You lose time and efficiency every time your brain resets to refocus. Simple activities like folding laundry while listening to a podcast are different. Those use different parts of the brain and don't compete for the same type of focus. But when you're trying to do two things that both require active thinking, like writing an email and responding to a message, you're not doing both at the same time. You're switching between them over and over, and the quality of both tasks usually drops. Studies have shown that frequent multitaskers often perform worse on tasks that require memory, concentration, or problem solving. They're more prone to errors and take longer to finish their work. And despite this, many still feel like they're being more productive because they're constantly doing something, even if it's not efficient. There's also something called attention residue. That's when a bit of your focus stays stuck on the previous task, even after you've moved on. It slows you down and makes deep focus harder to maintain. Single tasking, focusing on one thing at a time, might feel slower, but it's often faster in the long run. It allows for better concentration, fewer mistakes, and less mental fatigue. Multitasking may look like productivity, but more often it's just busyness in disguise. Your brain works better when it gets to finish one thing before starting another. Camels store water in their humps. Camels are known for surviving long stretches in the desert without water, and for most people, the explanation is simple. They store water in their humps. But that's not how their humps actually work. A camel's hump doesn't hold water, it holds fat. The fat acts as an energy reserve, allowing the camel to go for long periods without food, sometimes for weeks. This adaptation helps camels survive in environments where food is scarce and inconsistent. So where does the water story come from? Probably from the fact that camels are incredibly good at conserving water, but not by carrying it in their humps. Instead, their entire body is designed to use water as efficiently as possible. Their kidneys produce very concentrated urine, and their bodies can tolerate higher levels of dehydration than most other mammals. Even their noses are built to trap moisture from exhaled air, reducing how much water they lose with every breath. Camels can also rehydrate extremely quickly. After a period without water, a thirsty camel can drink up to 40 gallons in one sitting. Their red blood cells are oval-shaped rather than round, which helps their blood flow smoothly, even when water is scarce, and allows their bodies to absorb water faster when it becomes available. The fat in the hump also plays a secondary role in water regulation. When the fat is metabolized for energy, one of the byproducts is water. So while the hump doesn't directly store water, it does indirectly help the camel make the most of what it has. The image of a hump full of water is a convenient myth, but the real story is even more impressive. Camels survive the desert not by storing water in one spot, but by managing every drop through a highly adapted system. Reading more makes your eyesight worse. If you've ever worn glasses, someone has probably told you that too much reading will ruin your eyesight. It sounds like solid advice. Reading small text for hours must strain your eyes, right? But reading itself doesn't damage your vision. What it can do is temporarily tire out your eyes, especially if you're reading in poor lighting, staring at screens too long, or not taking breaks. This leads to eye strain, symptoms like blurry vision, headaches, or dryness. But none of that causes permanent damage. Once you rest your eyes, they recover. The concern about reading often comes from a link between close-up work and nearsightedness, or myopia. People with myopia can see nearby things clearly, but struggle to focus on distant objects. And while reading doesn't directly cause myopia, the connection comes from how much time someone spends focusing on things up close, especially during childhood, when the eyes are still developing. But there's another key factor: time spent not looking at distant objects. Studies have shown that kids who spend more time outdoors tend to have lower rates of myopia. That's likely because natural light and focusing on things far away give the eyes a better balance of visual activity. So while reading for hours on end might increase the risk of developing myopia in someone already predisposed, the act of reading itself doesn't wear out the eyes. What matters more is a healthy mix of visual habits: close-up work, distance viewing, good lighting, and regular breaks. Wearing glasses doesn't make your vision worse either. That's another common myth. Glasses help correct your focus. They don't weaken the eye. The real key to maintaining healthy vision isn't avoiding books. It's giving your eyes a little variety throughout the day. MSG is bad for you. MSG has a reputation. For years, people have blamed it for headaches, dizziness, and all kinds of unpleasant symptoms. It's been called unhealthy, unnatural, and even dangerous. But the science doesn't support that image. MSG stands for monosodium glutamate. It's a flavor enhancer that gives food, a savory taste called umami, the same taste found naturally in tomatoes, cheese, mushrooms, and meat. MSG is made by fermenting starch or sugar, and chemically, it's almost identical to glutamate, an amino acid your body already uses every day. The fear around MSG began in the 1960s after a letter to a medical journal described something called Chinese restaurant syndrome. The author claimed to feel sick after eating Chinese food and pointed the finger at MSG. The idea took off, but it wasn't based on solid research. Since then, MSG has been studied extensively. Large controlled studies have found no consistent link between MSG and health problems in the general population. Some people may be sensitive to very high doses on an empty stomach, but those levels are far beyond what's found in normal food. Regulatory agencies around the world, including the FDA, the WHO, and the European Food Safety Authority, all consider MSG safe. The myth stuck partly because it sounded scientific and partly because it was repeated for years. It also fed into cultural bias, especially toward Asian cuisine, despite the fact that MSG is used in snacks, canned soups, frozen meals, and fast food across all kinds of cuisines. MSG isn't a mystery chemical. It's a well-understood food additive that adds flavor without adding fat or sugar. For most people, it's no more harmful than the salt on your fries or the glutamate in a ripe tomato. The bad reputation just never caught up to the facts. Men think about sex every 7 seconds. The claim that men think about sex every 7 seconds shows up everywhere, from casual conversations to headlines. It paints a picture of a brain constantly hijacked by desire, but there's no science behind that number. The every 7 seconds claim has been repeated for decades, yet there's no original study or data to back it up. It likely started as a throwaway comment, then turned into a widely accepted fact. When researchers actually set out to test how often people think about sex, the numbers turned out to be much lower and far more reasonable. In one well-known study, college-aged men reported thinking about sex roughly 19 times a day on average. That's still more than women in the same study, but nowhere near once every 7 seconds. In the same study, men also thought about food and sleep almost as often as they did about sex, suggesting that basic needs and desires compete for mental space. The myth also exaggerates how the human mind works. Thoughts are spontaneous and influenced by surroundings, mood, and individual differences. No brain operates on a fixed schedule, especially not one that triggers a specific thought hundreds of times per hour. And while men, on average, may think about sex more often than women, the gap isn't as wide as people assume, and it varies from person to person. Culture, personality, and life experience all play a role. So the idea that men are wired to think about sex every few seconds isn't just unsupported, it's misleading. Real data shows that sexual thoughts happen regularly, but they're only one part of a much bigger mental picture. The 7-second myth survives because it's catchy, not because it's true. Napping is lazy. For a long time, napping has carried a bad reputation. It's often seen as a sign of laziness or a lack of discipline, as if anyone taking a break in the middle of the day must be avoiding real work. But that perception doesn't match what science knows about sleep. Napping isn't a sign of weakness. It's a natural part of how the body manages energy. Many people experience a dip in alertness during the early afternoon, even if they've had a full night's sleep. This drop in energy is built into our biology, not a sign of poor work ethic. Short naps, especially those lasting 10 to 30 minutes, have been shown to improve memory, focus, and mood. NASA even studied the effects of naps on pilots and found that a brief rest increased alertness and performance. These benefits happen because sleep isn't just about duration, it's also about timing and brain recovery. Longer naps, those that last an hour or more, can leave people feeling groggy afterward, but even these can help with learning and problem solving if timed properly. The key is understanding how different stages of sleep affect the body and using naps to restore energy, not replace a full night's rest. In some cultures, daytime napping is completely normal. The siesta in Spain or afternoon rests in parts of Asia are woven into daily routines. It's only in fast-paced work environments, especially in Western countries, that napping has become associated with slacking off. But taking a nap doesn't mean you're falling behind. It can actually mean you're giving your brain the reset it needs to keep going. When used correctly, napping isn't lazy. It's smart energy management backed by decades of research. Chewing gum stays in your stomach for 7 years. Almost every kid hears the same warning. Don't swallow your gum, it'll stay in your stomach for 7 years. It sounds serious enough to stick in your mind, but it's not true. Chewing gum is made of a gum base that your body can't digest. That part is true. Unlike most foods, the gum base doesn't break down in your stomach, but that doesn't mean it stays there for years. Like any other indigestible material, gum moves through your digestive system and eventually exits the body, usually within a few days. Your digestive system is designed to keep things moving. Muscles in your stomach and intestines work together to push food and anything else you swallow through the digestive tract. Gum doesn't get special treatment. It passes through just like the bits of corn, seeds, or small fibers your body can't fully digest. The 7-year myth likely started as a way to scare kids into not swallowing gum. And while swallowing gum occasionally isn't harmful, doing it often or in large amounts can potentially cause problems, especially in children. In rare cases, large amounts of swallowed gum can contribute to blockages in the digestive system, particularly if it's swallowed along with other indigestible items. But that's the exception, not the rule. For most people, a swallowed piece of gum is harmless. It goes in, it comes out, not 7 years later, but usually within a matter of days. So while it's not something to make a habit of, swallowing gum won't turn your stomach into a sticky time capsule. The human body has its limits, but it's a lot more efficient than that old playground rumor gives it credit for. Gum may be tough, but it doesn't beat your digestive system. Macs can't get viruses. For years, Apple users have heard one simple message: Macs don't get viruses. It's a comforting idea, especially compared to the long history of pop-ups, malware, and system crashes on older Windows machines. But the claim isn't entirely accurate. Macs can get viruses. They're just less likely to, for a few reasons. First, macOS is built on a Unix-based system, which includes built-in security features like file permissions and sandboxing. These features make it harder for unauthorized software to make system-wide changes. Second, for a long time, Macs made up a much smaller share of the computer market. That meant fewer people were targeting them. Malware creators tend to go where the numbers are, and Windows was the bigger target. Fewer users meant fewer incentives to build Mac-specific viruses. But as Apple's popularity grew, so did the interest from hackers. Malware, phishing attacks, and other threats are no longer rare in the Mac world. In fact, some types of threats, like adware and social engineering scams, are platform neutral. They rely less on the operating system and more on tricking the user into clicking something they shouldn't. Another misconception is that viruses are the only thing to worry about. In reality, most modern threats aren't viruses in the traditional sense. They're Trojans, spyware, ransomware, or unwanted applications that sneak in through downloads or fake updates. And Macs are not immune to those. That's why even Mac users are encouraged to update their systems regularly, avoid suspicious links, and use basic security practices. Antivirus software isn't always necessary for every user, but the idea that Macs are completely safe by design is outdated. No computer is invincible. Macs are secure, but not untouchable. You should pee on a jellyfish sting. You've probably seen it in movies or heard it from a friend. If someone gets stung by a jellyfish, the best thing you can do is pee on the wound. It sounds bizarre, but oddly plausible. After all, urine is warm, sterile, and acidic, right? But here's the truth. Peeing on a jellyfish sting can actually make things worse. Jellyfish stings come from microscopic barbs called nematocysts, which inject venom when triggered. Even after the initial sting, many of these barbs can still be active on the skin, just waiting to fire again. The wrong kind of treatment can set them off. Urine is made up of water, salts, and waste products, and its exact chemical makeup varies from person to person. In many cases, the salt concentration and temperature of urine can actually trigger more nematocysts to release venom, intensifying the pain instead of relieving it. So instead of soothing the sting, peeing on it might make the burning sensation even worse. So where did this idea come from? Probably from a misunderstanding of how acid or heat can neutralize venom in other situations. Or maybe it just stuck around because it was weird enough to remember. Either way, it doesn't hold up. The better approach? Rinse the sting with vinegar, which helps deactivate the stingers. Then use hot water, not cold, to soak the area, since heat can break down the proteins in the venom and reduce the pain. And if the sting is severe or involves a dangerous species, get medical help immediately. Peeing on someone's leg might make for a dramatic story, but it's not good first aid. The best thing you can do is reach for vinegar, not your bladder. You must drink 8 glasses of water a day. Drink 8 glasses of water a day. It's one of the most common health tips out there, repeated by doctors, trainers, and wellness blogs alike. But it turns out it's more of a guideline than a strict rule. The 8 glasses idea likely came from a general estimate that adults need around 2 litres of water per day. But that includes all sources of hydration, not just plain water. Food, coffee, tea, juice, and other beverages all contribute to your daily fluid intake. Even fruits and vegetables like cucumbers, oranges, and lettuce are mostly water. How much water a person needs actually depends on a variety of factors: body size, activity level, climate, and diet. Someone running in hot weather will need more water than someone sitting indoors all day. And if you eat a lot of high water content foods, you may naturally drink less. The body is also very good at telling you when it needs fluids. Thirst is a built-in system, not a sign that you've already failed. As long as you're listening to your body and your urine is pale yellow, you're probably well hydrated. It's also worth noting that drinking too much water can cause problems. Overhydration, or water intoxication, can dilute sodium levels in the blood and lead to serious health issues, especially if large amounts are consumed in a short time. The 8 glasses a day rule is simple and easy to remember, which is why it's stuck. But it's not a one-size-fits-all prescription. Most people get enough water just by drinking when they're thirsty and eating a balanced diet. Forcing down glass after glass of plain water isn't necessary for most healthy adults. Hydration matters, but the number 8 isn't magic. You can't get pregnant during your period. Many people believe that having sex during a period is a free pass to avoid pregnancy. It seems logical, After all, menstruation usually signals that you're not ovulating. But this idea isn't foolproof, and it overlooks how unpredictable the human body can be. Pregnancy happens when sperm fertilizes an egg. Ovulation, the release of that egg, typically occurs around the middle of the menstrual cycle. So in a standard 28-day cycle, ovulation usually happens around day 14, while menstruation happens at the beginning. Based on that schedule, the chance of pregnancy during a period seems low. But here's the catch. Not everyone has a textbook cycle. Some people have shorter cycles, irregular timing, or ovulate earlier than expected. If someone ovulates early, say around day 10, and has sex during their period, which could be around day 5 or 6, sperm could still be alive when the egg is released. That's because sperm can survive in the reproductive tract for up to 5 days. There's also the issue of misidentifying bleeding. Sometimes, spotting from ovulation or irregular cycles can be mistaken for a period. If someone has sex thinking they're menstruating, but they're actually close to ovulation, the chances of pregnancy increase. It's not likely to get pregnant during a period, but it's definitely possible, especially for people with irregular cycles or shorter gaps between menstruation and ovulation. And relying on timing alone is never a reliable method of birth control. The belief that periods provide total protection is based on an oversimplified view of how the menstrual cycle works. In reality, the body doesn't always follow the calendar. Fertility windows can shift, and sperm have more staying power than most people realize. Timing reduces the odds, but it doesn't eliminate the risk. Dogs only see in black and white. For years, people believed that dogs only see the world in black and white, like an old TV show or a faded photograph. It's a simple idea that's stuck, but it doesn't match what science has discovered about how dogs actually see. Dogs do see color, just not in the same way humans do. Human eyes have 3 types of color-detecting cells called cones, which let us see a wide range of colors, including red, green, and blue. Dogs have only 2 types of cones. This means their color vision is limited compared to ours, but it's far from black and white. In practical terms, dogs see the world in shades of blue and yellow. They can tell the difference between blue and red, but red appears more like a dull brown or grey to them. Green and orange also lose their distinctiveness and tend to blend with other colours. So a bright red ball in green grass might not stand out much to a dog, but a blue one would. Researchers have tested this by training dogs to respond to different coloured lights and objects. Their responses show they can distinguish certain colours consistently, just within a smaller spectrum than humans. Dogs also rely less on colour than we do. Their vision is built more for motion and low-light conditions. They see better in the dark and detect movement more easily, which made sense for their ancestors who hunted at dawn or dusk. So while dogs don't see the full rainbow, they definitely don't live in a grayscale world. Their vision is limited compared to ours, but it's still functional and surprisingly well suited for the way they interact with their surroundings. The black and white myth just doesn't hold up under the lens of modern science. Starving a fever helps you heal. Starve a fever, feed a cold. It's one of the most commonly repeated pieces of home health advice. But despite how familiar it sounds, the idea that you should avoid eating to recover from a fever doesn't hold up to medical evidence. A fever is your body's way of fighting off infection. When your temperature rises, it makes it harder for viruses and bacteria to survive. At the same time, your immune system becomes more active. That response takes energy, and your body gets that energy from nutrients in food. Starving yourself during a fever doesn't speed up recovery. In fact, it can do the opposite. When your body is already under stress, depriving it of calories, vitamins, and fluids can weaken your immune response and make it harder to bounce back. While it's normal to have a reduced appetite when you're sick, it's still important to eat what you can, especially foods that are easy to digest, like soups, toast, or fruit. Staying hydrated is even more critical. Fevers cause your body to lose fluids through sweat, and dehydration can make symptoms worse. Water, broth, or electrolyte drinks help keep your system balanced while your body works to recover. The starve a fever idea may have started centuries ago, when people didn't understand how illness worked and feared that eating would somehow feed the disease. But modern research shows that fueling the body appropriately, without overdoing it, supports the healing process. There's no special rule for feeding or starving different illnesses. What matters most is listening to your body and giving it what it needs: rest, hydration, and nourishment. A fever signals that your immune system is working. Giving it energy and support is part of helping it do the job right. People are either left-brained or right-brained. You've probably heard that people are either left-brained or right-brained. Left-brained individuals are supposed to be logical and analytical, while right-brained people are said to be creative and intuitive. It's a neat way to explain personality, but it's not how the brain actually works. The idea comes from the fact that the brain has two hemispheres, and each does handle some tasks more than the other. Language tends to be processed more in the left hemisphere, while spatial awareness and facial recognition often lean toward the right. That part is true, but these differences don't divide people into types. In reality, the brain is highly interconnected. Both hemispheres work together constantly, communicating through a dense bundle of nerve fibers called the corpus callosum. Whether you're solving a math problem or writing a song, both sides of the brain are involved. One hemisphere might be more active during certain tasks, but that doesn't mean the other one isn't participating. Brain imaging studies have looked at this idea directly. Researchers scanned thousands of brains and found no consistent evidence that people favor one side over the other in a way that defines their personality or abilities. Someone might be artistic and also great with numbers. Traits like creativity and logic aren't locked to specific sides of the brain. The left brain, right brain myth likely stuck because it offers a simple explanation for complex behavior. But human thought, emotion, and talent are more flexible than that. Brains don't sort us into categories. They adapt, grow, and specialize based on experience, not strict hemispheric roles. So while it's true that the brain has a left and a right side, the idea that people are one or the other doesn't reflect how thinking actually happens. The mind works as a whole, not in halves. Brown eggs are more nutritious than white. At the grocery store, brown eggs often sit next to white eggs with a higher price tag, and a common belief that they're healthier. Many people assume brown eggs must be more natural, more nutritious, or just better overall. But the color of an eggshell doesn't tell you anything about what's inside. The only real difference between brown and white eggs is the breed of the hen that laid them. White feathered hens with white earlobes typically lay white eggs. Brown feathered hens with red earlobes lay brown eggs. That's it. It's a genetic trait, like eye color in humans, not a sign of quality or nutrition. Nutritionally, brown and white eggs are nearly identical. They contain the same amounts of protein, fat, vitamins, and minerals, assuming the hens are raised under similar conditions. The real nutritional differences come from the hen's diet and environment. For example, hens fed omega-3 rich diets will produce eggs with more omega-3s, regardless of shell color. So why are brown eggs more expensive? It's not because they're better for you. Brown egg-laying hens are often larger and require more feed. That added cost is passed along to the consumer. not because the eggs are healthier, but because the hens are more expensive to raise. The brown versus white egg myth sticks around because it feels intuitive. Brown rice is considered healthier than white rice. Whole wheat bread is often preferred over white. So it's easy to assume the same rule applies to eggs, but in this case, the shell color doesn't reflect the nutrition inside. When choosing eggs, the important factors are how the hens are raised and what they're fed, not the shade of the shell. Whether brown or white, an egg is an egg, and the color doesn't change the contents. Tilting your head back stops a nosebleed. Tilting your head back during a nosebleed doesn't stop the bleeding, it just redirects it. Instead of blood coming out your nose, it flows down the back of your throat. You might not see it, but you're swallowing it. And that can lead to nausea, stomach irritation, and even vomiting. In rare cases, it can also affect your breathing if too much blood pools near the airway. The better move: sit up straight, tilt your head slightly forward, and pinch the soft part of your nose, just below the bridge. Hold it for about 10 to 15 minutes without letting go. This pressure helps seal the broken blood vessels and gives them time to clot. Breathing through your mouth during this time can help you stay calm and steady. Most nosebleeds are harmless and stop on their own with the right care. They're often caused by dry air, allergies, nose picking, or minor irritation. But the old myth of tilting your head back has lingered for generations, passed around like a trusted first aid tip, even though medical experts now strongly advise against it. So next time you or someone else gets a nosebleed, forget the backward lean. Lean forward, apply pressure, and let gravity help, not hurt, the process. It's a small change in posture that makes a big difference in how your body heals. Early birds are more successful. The idea that early birds are more successful is everywhere, from motivational quotes to business advice. Waking up before sunrise is often framed as a secret weapon for productivity. But while early risers may appear more disciplined, success isn't just about what time your alarm goes off. Some people naturally wake up early. Others feel more alert and focused later in the day. These differences come from individual circadian rhythms, biological patterns that influence when we sleep, wake, and perform at our best. They're largely set by genetics, not willpower. Studies have shown that morning people tend to align better with traditional schedules like school or 9-to-5 jobs. That alignment can lead to advantages, especially in structured environments. But that doesn't mean night owls are lazy or less capable. In fact, research shows no consistent link between wake-up time and long-term success across different fields. Plenty of high-performing people thrive with late schedules. Artists, engineers, writers, and programmers often do their best work after dark. What matters most isn't the time of day. It's the quality of focus, energy, and consistency during waking hours. Sleep also plays a critical role. An early start is only helpful if it's paired with enough rest. Sacrificing sleep to wake up early can backfire, reducing concentration, memory, and decision-making. Whether you're up at 5 a.m. or 10 a.m., being well rested is a better predictor of performance than how early you start. The success of early birds may come from how they use their time, not just when they start. But the same logic applies to late risers. Productivity comes from structure, not from the hour on the clock. Success isn't tied to the sunrise. It's tied to habits that match your own rhythm and let you work at your best. You need talent to be creative. Some people believe that creativity is something you're either born with or not, that it's a rare gift tied to natural talent. But the truth is, creativity isn't a fixed trait. It's a skill, one that can be developed, practiced, and improved over time. The myth comes from the way we talk about famous artists, writers, or inventors. We often describe them as naturally gifted, as if their ideas appeared fully formed. But most creative breakthroughs come from long periods of trial and error. Even the most iconic works of art or innovation are built on years of failed attempts, small experiments, and learned technique. Creativity isn't limited to the arts either. It shows up in everyday problem solving, cooking, coding, or even organizing your schedule in a smarter way. It's about seeing patterns, combining ideas, and thinking in ways that aren't strictly routine. And that has more to do with persistence than with raw talent. Studies in psychology have shown that creativity can be trained. People who regularly challenge themselves with new inputs, like learning a skill, exploring new perspectives, or even just asking what if, tend to become more creative over time. It's less about having a spark and more about building a habit. Even the feeling of being uninspired is often a matter of environment and mindset, not ability. Creative people don't wait for inspiration. They create systems, routines, and space to let ideas take shape, even if the results are messy at first. Talent might make the learning curve a bit smoother at the beginning. But when it comes to creative output, effort, curiosity, and practice are what really make the difference. Creativity isn't something you either have or don't, it's something you grow. Wi-Fi signals are dangerous. Wi-Fi is everywhere now, at home, in cafes, schools, offices, even airplanes. But with that constant connection comes a popular concern. Are these invisible signals actually harmful? The idea that Wi-Fi is dangerous comes from the fact that it uses electromagnetic radiation. And when people hear radiation, they often think of things like X-rays or radioactive material. But the kind of radiation used by Wi-Fi is very different. Wi-Fi signals operate in the radio frequency range, which is considered non-ionizing. That means they don't carry enough energy to damage your DNA or cells the way ionizing radiation can. Think of it like this. Sunlight and microwave ovens both use electromagnetic waves, but they operate at different frequencies and energy levels. Wi-Fi sits at the low energy end of that spectrum, right alongside things like FM radio and visible light. So, what does the science say? Numerous studies over the past 2 decades have looked into this question. So far, there's no solid evidence that normal exposure to Wi-Fi signals poses a health risk. Organizations like the World Health Organization and the US FDA have reviewed the data and found no consistent link between Wi-Fi and harmful effects. Of course, that hasn't stopped rumors from spreading. People sometimes report headaches or discomfort they believe are caused by Wi-Fi, a condition called electromagnetic hypersensitivity. But controlled tests haven't shown a reliable connection between symptoms and actual signal exposure. That doesn't mean the topic is completely closed. Researchers continue to monitor long-term effects and evaluate new technologies. But for now, the signals coming from your router are considered safe. They're powerful enough to stream video through walls, but not powerful enough to harm you. Brain games make you smarter. It's easy to believe that solving a few puzzles on your phone each day can make you smarter. After all, they're called brain games. And who wouldn't want a sharper mind from playing a game? The idea sounds promising. Many apps and websites claim to boost memory, focus, or even overall intelligence through short daily mental exercises. These games often involve things like matching patterns, recalling numbers, or solving quick logic problems. And while they can be fun, the truth is a bit more complicated. Studies show that when you play these games regularly, you do get better at them. If you practice a memory game every day, your score will probably improve. But that doesn't always mean your memory is better in real life. That's because these games mostly improve performance on that specific task, not on general thinking or problem solving outside the game. Researchers call this the difference between near transfer and far transfer. Near transfer means you get better at the thing you're practicing. Far transfer would mean that improvement spills over into unrelated areas, like doing better in school or remembering your grocery list. And so far, there's limited evidence that brain games lead to far transfer. That said, keeping your brain active is still important. Reading, learning new skills, or engaging in conversation often have broader mental benefits than app-based games. Some studies suggest activities that combine thinking with emotion or movement, like learning music or playing a sport, are more effective at keeping the brain sharp. So while brain games might not unlock genius-level intelligence, they're not a waste of time either. They can help you stay mentally engaged, just like crossword puzzles or Sudoku. But for real-world mental fitness, variety and challenge, not repetition, seem to matter more. Cats always land on their feet. Cats are known for being agile, graceful, and surprisingly good at getting out of trouble. One of the most common beliefs about them is that they always land on their feet. It sounds like a superpower, and in a way, it kind of is. But there's more to it than just luck or instinct. This idea comes from a real phenomenon called the cat righting reflex. It's a built-in ability that lets a cat reorient its body during a fall so that it can land feet first. The reflex starts developing in kittens at just a few weeks old and is usually fully functional by the time they're around 7 weeks. Here's how it works. When a cat begins to fall, it uses its flexible spine and lack of a collarbone to twist its upper body independently of the lower body. First, the cat turns its head to face downward. Then it rotates its front half, followed by the back half. This movement helps them realign and prepare for landing. They also spread their legs out to slow their fall slightly, like a parachute, and then pull in just before impact to absorb the landing. But that doesn't mean they always land perfectly. If a cat falls from too short a height, it might not have enough time to fully twist around. And even from greater heights, injuries can still happen depending on the landing surface or the cat's health. Interestingly, cats falling from higher places sometimes have better outcomes. That's because they have more time to adjust mid-air and slow their fall using their body position. It's a strange bit of physics that actually plays to their advantage. So while it's mostly true that cats often land on their feet, it's not a guarantee, and definitely not something to test. If you drop a penny from a skyscraper, it can kill someone. If you've ever stood at the top of a tall building, someone's probably joked, "Don't drop a penny, it could kill someone." It's a scary idea. A harmless coin turning into a deadly missile just from the height of a skyscraper. But in reality, physics doesn't back that up. The myth is based on a simple logic. The higher something falls, the faster it goes, and the more damage it can do. And while that's partly true, it leaves out an important detail: air resistance. A penny is small, flat, and light. As it falls, it meets resistance from the air, which quickly slows its acceleration. This means that instead of speeding up indefinitely, the penny reaches what's called terminal velocity, the maximum speed it can fall through the air. For a penny, terminal velocity is around 25 miles per hour. That's fast enough to sting or maybe leave a mark if it hit you, but it's nowhere near fast enough to penetrate skin or cause serious harm. Plus, because it's so light and tends to flutter as it falls, a penny rarely lands edge down. It usually wobbles and drifts, reducing its force even more. Even if it fell from the Empire State Building or a similar height, the end result would likely be a surprise, not a tragedy. In fact, Several experiments and even real-life drops have shown that the worst outcome is a startled person, not an injured one. So while the idea of a lethal penny makes for a dramatic story, it doesn't hold up under closer inspection. Gravity's powerful, but when it's working on something as small and slow as a penny, it has its limits. You only dream during REM sleep. When most people think about dreaming, they picture it happening during REM sleep, the stage with rapid eye movement, active brain waves, and vivid emotional dreams. And it's true, REM sleep is where some of the most memorable and intense dreams occur. But the idea that you only dream during REM, that's a myth. In reality, people can, and do, dream during non-REM sleep as well. It's just that those dreams tend to be less vivid, more abstract, or harder to recall. REM dreams are often bizarre and story-like. Non-REM dreams, on the other hand, are more fragmented, like scattered thoughts, emotions, or images. But they're still dreams. Scientists discovered this by waking people at different stages of sleep. Even when roused during non-REM stages, many reported mental activity, flashes of scenes, feelings, or short narratives. The content might not be as dramatic, but the brain is still at work. So why does the myth persist? Because REM dreams are more memorable. That's when the brain is closest to waking consciousness, which makes it easier to retain what you experienced. Non-REM dreams, by contrast, often fade before you even open your eyes. And here's another twist. Some of the most important dreaming might happen during deep non-REM sleep, when the brain replays memories, processes emotions, and links ideas, even if you don't remember any of it. So, while REM sleep may steal the spotlight, dreaming happens throughout the night, across different stages. The idea that dreams only occur in one narrow slice of sleep ignores the full picture. Your brain doesn't wait for REM to start dreaming. It dreams all night long, even when you don't notice. Frozen fruits and veggies are less healthy. Frozen fruits and vegetables often get treated like second-class produce. People assume they're less fresh, less flavorful, and definitely less nutritious. But that idea doesn't quite hold up under closer inspection. The belief likely comes from the fact that fresh produce looks more appealing. It's colourful, it's crisp, and it hasn't been sealed in a bag. But freshness isn't the only factor that affects nutritional value. Timing matters too. Most frozen fruits and vegetables are picked at peak ripeness, then flash frozen within hours. That quick freeze locks in vitamins and nutrients before they have a chance to degrade. In contrast, fresh produce often travels long distances and spends days, sometimes weeks, on trucks and shelves before reaching your kitchen. During that time, certain nutrients like vitamin C can slowly break down. Now, not every frozen item is perfect. Some vegetables lose a bit of texture when thawed, and pre-packaged frozen meals with sauces or added salt are a different story. But when it comes to plain, unseasoned frozen fruits and vegetables, the nutritional content often holds up surprisingly well, and in some cases, better than their fresh counterparts that have been sitting around too long. Another plus, frozen produce helps reduce food waste. You use only what you need, when you need it, and the rest stays preserved. That's not just convenient, it's cost-effective. The idea that frozen equals unhealthy is more of a marketing myth than a scientific truth. As long as you're choosing items without added sugars or preservatives, frozen fruits and veggies can be a reliable and nutritious part of a balanced diet. Whether it comes from the produce aisle or the freezer section, what matters most is getting those nutrients into your meals. Milk helps broken bones heal faster Milk has long been marketed as the ultimate bone-strengthening drink. It's rich in calcium, it's creamy, it's everywhere. And somewhere along the way, a myth took hold that drinking milk can help heal broken bones faster. But the truth, it's not quite that simple. Calcium is absolutely important for bone health. That much is true. It plays a vital role in building and maintaining bone density. But when it comes to healing a fracture, drinking milk alone won't speed up the process in any magical way. Bone healing is a complex biological repair job that involves inflammation, cell growth, collagen formation, and mineralization. And no single food or drink can dramatically accelerate it. What's more important than milk alone is having an overall nutrient-rich diet. Your body needs not just calcium, but also vitamin D, magnesium, protein, and phosphorus to properly rebuild bone tissue. Without the right balance, even high calcium intake won't help much. And for people who are lactose intolerant or don't consume dairy, plenty of alternatives like leafy greens, nuts, seeds, and fortified plant milks offer the same bone-friendly nutrients. The myth probably stuck because milk is such a dietary staple and easy to associate with strong bones. But it's a case of overpromising. Milk may help maintain healthy bones, but it doesn't work like glue for a fracture. The real key to healing is rest, proper medical care, and a balanced diet over time. Chugging a gallon of milk won't rush things. Your body heals at its own pace, and no single food can fast-forward biology. So while milk isn't bad for bones, it's not a miracle cure. It's a helpful ingredient, not the whole recipe. Einstein failed math. Albert Einstein, one of the most famous scientists in history, did not fail math. But somehow that myth still floats around as if it were a fact. It's often used as motivation, proof that even geniuses struggle. But the reality is a bit different. Einstein actually excelled in math from a young age. By the time he was 12, he was already working through college-level textbooks. At 16, he applied to a technical university in Zurich. He passed the math and science sections easily. What tripped him up was subjects like language and history, which brought his overall score down. So he didn't get in, not because of math, but because of other subjects. The myth may have started from a misunderstanding of grading systems. In one of Einstein's early schools, a lower number meant a higher grade. Later, he moved to a school where the system was reversed. Someone looking at his old report card might have seen a 1 and assumed it meant he scored poorly, when it actually meant the opposite. Einstein himself even joked about the rumor. When a reporter once asked him about failing math, he said, "I never failed in mathematics. Before I was 15, I had mastered differential and integral calculus." The truth is, Einstein's theories, especially general relativity, relied on advanced mathematical concepts like tensor calculus. He wasn't just good at math. He needed math to express some of the most complex ideas about time, space, and gravity. So while the story of Einstein failing math makes for a catchy anecdote, it just doesn't line up with the facts. His success wasn't in spite of math struggles. It was built on a strong foundation of mathematical thinking from the very beginning. All introverts hate people. Not everyone who enjoys quiet time is antisocial. But somehow the myth still sticks. Introverts hate people. The truth is far less extreme and a lot more interesting. An introvert isn't someone who avoids all social contact. They're simply someone who recharges best when they're alone or in low-stimulation environments. That might mean preferring a one-on-one conversation over a big party, or choosing a solo walk over a loud group dinner. It's not about dislike, it's about energy. The confusion often comes from how people interpret behavior. If someone leaves early from a gathering, doesn't speak much in a crowd, or turns down plans, it's easy to assume they're being cold or distant. But for an introvert, those decisions are often about managing mental energy, not rejecting people. In fact, many introverts have close friendships, deep emotional bonds, and strong social skills. Some even enjoy public speaking or leadership roles. What matters is how they recover from those experiences. Extroverts might feel more energized after a big group event. Introverts might feel drained and need quiet time to bounce back. Personality research backs this up. Studies show that introversion isn't tied to misanthropy. It's tied to stimulation levels and how a person prefers to interact with the world. Being quiet or reflective isn't a sign of dislike. It's just a different way of processing. So while the stereotype might paint introverts as loners who avoid connection, most are simply selective about when and how they engage. They don't hate people. They just don't need to be around them all the time to feel okay. If you go outside with wet hair, you'll catch a cold. Stepping outside with wet hair might feel uncomfortable, especially on a chilly day. But will it actually make you sick? That's one of the most common health myths still floating around today. The idea sounds believable. Cold weather, wet hair, and the next thing you know, you've got a runny nose. But the science tells a different story. Colds are caused by viruses, not temperature. Specifically, the rhinovirus is the most common culprit. You don't catch it from the cold itself. You catch it from exposure to someone who's already infected. So where did the myth come from? Likely from patterns people noticed. In colder months, more people tend to get sick. But that's not because their hair is wet. It's because we spend more time indoors in close quarters with shared air and surfaces. That makes it easier for viruses to spread. Now, being cold isn't totally irrelevant. Some studies suggest that getting chilled may slightly lower your immune response, which could make it a bit easier for a virus to take hold if you've already been exposed. But that's not the same as cold weather causing illness directly. You still need to come into contact with a virus for a cold to happen. In other words, going outside with wet hair won't magically create a virus in your body. It might make you feel cold and uncomfortable, but it's not going to give you a cold unless you're exposed to germs from someone else. So while towel drying your hair before heading out is a good idea for warmth, don't worry. Your wet hair alone isn't what's making you sick. It's the viruses, not the temperature, that cause the common cold. Popping a pimple makes it spread. You wake up, look in the mirror, and there it is, a bright red pimple begging to be popped. But then you hear the warning, "Don't pop it, it'll spread and get worse." It's a myth repeated in skincare advice for years, but here's the reality. Popping a pimple doesn't make acne spread, at least not in the way most people think. The myth comes from a mix of truth and misunderstanding. When you pop a pimple, especially with dirty hands or too much force, you risk pushing bacteria, oil, and dead skin cells deeper into the pore, or even into nearby pores. That can cause more irritation, inflammation, or even a second breakout near the original spot. But it's not the act of popping that makes acne spread like a contagious infection. Acne isn't contagious. You can't spread it across your face like smearing germs. What you can do is injure the skin, which increases the chance of swelling, scarring, and even delayed healing. Popping also breaks the protective barrier of your skin, leaving it more vulnerable to infection from outside bacteria. In some cases, when you pop a pimple, you might not fully remove all the contents. What's left behind can cause the spot to swell up again, which feels like it's spreading when it's really just re-inflaming. The best approach: leave it alone, apply a warm compress, and use a proper topical treatment with salicylic acid or benzoyl peroxide. If it's severe, a dermatologist can handle it safely. So while popping won't cause acne to jump from pore to pore, it can make the situation worse if done carelessly. It's not about spreading bacteria, it's about making your skin angrier than it needs to be. The color red angers bulls. It's easy to picture a matador waving a bright red cape as a furious bull charges forward. But here's the twist. Bulls aren't reacting to the color red. They don't even see it the way humans do. Bulls are actually colorblind to red and green. Like many other mammals, they have what's called dichromatic vision, meaning they only perceive a limited range of colors. To a bull, that famous red cape doesn't look red at all. It's just a shade of grey or dull yellow. So what actually provokes the bull? It's the movement. During a bullfight, the matador waves the cape in sharp, exaggerated motions. That sudden motion is what grabs the bull's attention and triggers its charge, not the hue of the fabric. The red colour is more for the audience than the animal. It's dramatic. It hides bloodstains, and it fits the theatrical nature of the spectacle. But to the bull, it could be any colour, and the response would likely be the same. Outside the arena, bulls, like most animals, respond more to motion, sound, and body language than to specific colours. So if someone's wearing red in a pasture, it's no more dangerous than wearing blue or green. This myth likely stuck around because of how often red is associated with anger, danger, or heat in human culture. But in the case of bulls, it's not about symbolism, it's about motion. Red just happens to be the chosen colour for a centuries-old tradition that relies more on showmanship than science. You need motivation to get started. We tend to think that motivation comes first. You feel inspired, and then you get to work. But more often, it's the other way around. The idea that you need motivation to get started sounds logical. After all, we associate motivation with energy, focus, and a reason to act. But studies in behavioral psychology suggest that action doesn't always wait on motivation. It actually creates it. This is known as the action precedes motivation model. In other words, getting started triggers momentum, which then builds motivation. It's a bit like exercise. You might not feel like going to the gym, but once you begin moving, your energy level rises, your mindset shifts, and by the end, you're glad you did it. That motivation to continue often shows up after you've already started. This is especially true for tasks that feel overwhelming or unclear. Waiting to feel ready can stretch out for days, weeks, or even longer. But doing just one small piece, a single paragraph, a few minutes of cleaning, 5 push-ups, can flip the switch. The brain experiences a small win, and that creates a feedback loop that encourages more effort. This is why techniques like the 5-minute rule or just start for 2 minutes are effective. They lower the barrier to entry. And once the task is in motion, motivation tends to catch up. Motivation is important, but it's not always the spark. More often, it's the flame that grows after the match has already been struck. Success means choosing one career path. For a long time, success has been pictured as a straight road. Pick one career, stick to it, climb the ladder. That's the formula many people grow up believing. The idea that success means choosing one career path is rooted in older models of work, where jobs were stable, industries predictable, and loyalty often rewarded with long-term growth. It made sense when people spent decades at the same company, gradually rising through seniority. But today, that's no longer the norm. Modern careers are more flexible and less linear. People switch roles, industries, and entire fields more often than ever before. Some leave law to become designers. Others move from teaching to tech. A successful career doesn't always look like a vertical line. It might zigzag, pause, restart, or branch off into something completely new. And it's not always about climbing higher. For many, success means doing work that's meaningful, balanced, or creatively fulfilling, even if it involves changing directions multiple times. In fact, research shows that developing a broad skill set across different roles can actually make someone more adaptable and resilient in a fast-changing economy. The idea that you have to choose just one thing and stick to it for life isn't wrong, but it's not the only way. For some people, deep specialization brings satisfaction. For others, variety and reinvention are what keep things engaging. The key isn't to find one perfect career and never stray. It's to build a path that evolves with your interests, strengths, and opportunities. Careers today are less like train tracks and more like hiking trails. There isn't always one right way forward, and changing paths doesn't mean failure. It just means you're still moving. Yawning means your brain needs more oxygen. You're in a quiet room, feeling a little sluggish, and you let out a big yawn. Almost instantly, someone says, "You must need more oxygen. That's why you're yawning." It's an explanation that sounds scientific, simple, and logical, but it's also wrong. For decades, people believed yawning was the body's way of boosting oxygen intake. The idea was that when oxygen levels drop, yawning brings in a bigger breath to supply the brain with what it needs. But research has shown that oxygen levels don't change significantly before or after yawning. Breathing more deeply doesn't stop you from yawning, and even in oxygen-rich environments, people yawn just as often. So what's really going on? Scientists still don't have a single definitive answer, but the most supported theory is this: yawning helps regulate brain temperature. Your brain works best within a narrow temperature range. When it gets slightly too warm, a yawn, which stretches the jaw and brings in cooler air, may help cool it down. Think of it like a mini fan for your skull. Another theory is that yawning plays a social or communicative role. Yawns are contagious after all. Seeing someone yawn can make you do it too. Even just reading about yawning might trigger it. That kind of automatic response suggests a neurological function tied to empathy, alertness, or group behavior. So while yawning feels like a response to low energy or boredom, it's not a simple oxygen shortage. It's a much more complex and fascinating reflex, one that's still being studied. The next time you yawn and someone mentions oxygen, you'll know better. Your brain isn't gasping for air, it's just trying to stay cool, literally. You can't learn new things after a certain age. It's a common belief that once you reach a certain age, your brain just stops being able to learn new things. You'll hear people say they're too old to pick up a new language, or that it's too late to start learning an instrument. But this idea doesn't actually line up with what we know about how the brain works. The brain doesn't suddenly shut off its learning ability after childhood. In fact, it's capable of forming new connections throughout your entire life. This concept is known as neuroplasticity. It means the brain can reorganize itself, make new pathways, and even strengthen existing ones, no matter how old you are. Now, it's true that learning might feel slower as we age. Children tend to pick up certain things like pronunciation or motor skills more easily. That's because their brains are in a highly flexible state of development. But adults actually have some advantages too. They have more life experience, better focus, and stronger long-term planning, factors that can help with learning complex concepts. For example, adults who decide to learn coding, start painting, or even go back to school later in life aren't working against biology. They're just working against the myth that learning is only for the young. Of course, the brain does change with age. Processing speed may decline slightly, and memory recall can take more effort. But that doesn't block learning. It just means it might require a little more time and repetition. So the idea that you can't teach an old dog new tricks is more cultural than scientific. With practice, consistency, and interest, people can learn new things well into their 60s, 70s, or beyond. The learning process evolves, but it definitely doesn't stop. Some people are just not math people. Some people say they're just not math people, like it's a built-in trait you're either born with or not. But the truth is, that idea doesn't hold up when you look at how learning really works. Math isn't a natural gift that only a few people receive. It's a skill. And like reading, writing, or playing a sport, it's something you develop with practice. Sure, some people might pick it up faster than others at first, but that doesn't mean the rest are locked out. What really matters is how math is taught and how students build confidence through small wins. The not a math person idea often starts early. A student might struggle with long division or algebra, and suddenly math feels impossible. Over time, that frustration turns into a label, one that sticks. But falling behind in math doesn't mean someone lacks the ability to learn it. In most cases, it means they haven't been shown the right approach for how their mind works. Even in adulthood, it's possible to improve math skills with the right explanations and enough patience. Today, resources like visual math tools, games, and online tutorials help break down concepts in ways that are actually intuitive. And once someone experiences a clear aha moment, that old label starts to fade. Research has shown that the brain can grow new pathways with effort and repetition. This means math ability isn't fixed, it's flexible. Mistakes aren't signs of failure. They're part of how the brain figures things out. So while it's normal for math to feel hard at times, the idea that some people are just permanently bad at it is more of a myth than a fact. With the right support, almost anyone can become good at math. Alcohol warms you up. That warm, flushed feeling you get after a drink on a cold night might seem comforting, but it's not actually warming you up the way you think it is. The idea that alcohol warms the body is one of the most common misconceptions out there. Here's what's really happening. When you drink alcohol, it causes your blood vessels, especially the ones near your skin, to dilate. That's called vasodilation. As those vessels widen, warm blood rushes from your core out to your skin's surface. That's what gives you that signature redness in the face, a feeling of heat, and sometimes even a bit of sweat. But that sensation is misleading. While your skin might feel warmer to the touch, what's actually happening is heat leaving your core. By pushing warm blood outward, alcohol lowers your internal body temperature. So even though you feel toasty, your body is actually cooling down faster than normal. In cold environments, this can be dangerous. That fake sense of warmth might make someone less aware of how cold they really are, increasing the risk of hypothermia. It's one of the reasons why alcohol isn't recommended for people exposed to freezing temperatures, even if a drink seems like a good idea at the time. There's also an impact on your body's natural response to cold. Alcohol can reduce your ability to shiver, which is your built-in way of generating heat. So it's interfering on two fronts, pulling heat away from your center and reducing your ability to make more. So while alcohol can make you feel warm, it's not helping your body stay warm. In fact, it's doing the opposite. That pleasant buzz on a winter's night is really just a trick of the circulatory system. You can detox with juice. Drinking nothing but juice for a few days might sound like a quick way to flush out toxins, but the science behind juice cleanses isn't quite what the marketing suggests. The idea is simple. Replace solid food with fruit and vegetable juices for a short period to give your body a break and help it detox. Supporters claim it boosts energy, clears the skin, and eliminates harmful substances from your system. But here's the catch. Your body already has a built-in detox system, and it's working all the time. Your liver, kidneys, lungs, and even your skin constantly filter and remove waste products. That's their job. You don't need to drink green juice to activate them. And most toxins that people talk about in the context of juice cleanses are vague and undefined, often not linked to any real harmful substance that can actually be flushed out with liquids. In fact, doing a juice cleanse can sometimes backfire. Juices are often high in sugar and low in protein and fat, meaning your body can end up missing out on essential nutrients. You may feel tired, dizzy, or irritable. And while you might lose weight, most of it is water and muscle, not fat. As soon as you return to a normal diet, that weight often comes right back. To be clear, drinking fresh juice in moderation can be part of a healthy diet. It's one way to get some vitamins, but using juice alone as a detox method isn't necessary, and it's not supported by strong evidence. Your body doesn't need a reset button. It needs consistent care. Real detox happens through balanced eating, hydration, sleep, and time, not a bottle labeled cleanse. Brain cells don't regenerate. For a long time, people believed that once a brain cell died, it was gone for good. The idea was simple and scary. Brain cells don't regenerate, so every loss is permanent. That belief held for most of the 20th century. It was widely taught that humans are born with a fixed number of neurons, and any damage, whether from injury, aging, or disease, was irreversible. This idea shaped how we thought about brain health, memory, and recovery. But modern neuroscience has rewritten that story. It turns out that certain areas of the brain can, in fact, produce new neurons, a process called neurogenesis. One of the key areas where this happens is the hippocampus, which is involved in memory and learning. Researchers discovered that even in adulthood, this part of the brain can generate new cells under the right conditions. That said, brain cell regeneration isn't unlimited. It's not like skin or blood cells that rapidly replace themselves. Most of the brain's structure remains fairly stable, and some areas, especially those affected by severe trauma or degenerative diseases, still show little to no ability to rebuild. Still, the discovery of neurogenesis opened up new paths in research. It helped explain why activities like exercise, sleep, and learning new skills are linked to better brain health. These things may actually help stimulate the growth of new neurons or strengthen the connections between existing ones. So while the old claim that brain cells don't grow back isn't entirely wrong, it's outdated. The brain is more adaptable than we once thought. It doesn't regenerate like other tissues, but under the right conditions, it can surprise us with new growth, new connections, and new hope. Eating protein. Right after exercise builds more muscle. You finish your workout, towel off, and immediately grab a protein shake. Because everyone says there's a magic window right after exercise when your muscles soak up protein like a sponge. But here's the truth. The post-workout protein rush isn't as urgent as it sounds. Yes, your body does need protein to repair and build muscle, especially after resistance training. But the idea that you must eat it within 30 minutes to see gains is more fitness folklore than fact. This so-called anabolic window is much longer and more flexible than people think. What actually matters more is your total protein intake over the course of the day, not whether you drink a shake the moment you rack your last weight. If you've had a meal with enough protein in the hours before working out, Your body already has the amino acids it needs in circulation, and if you eat a proper meal sometime after training, even up to 2 hours later, you're still getting the muscle-building benefits. The urgency myth likely grew out of bodybuilding culture and supplement marketing. Companies had a vested interest in convincing you to buy fast-acting shakes, but research now shows that muscle protein synthesis, the process that helps muscles grow, remains elevated for hours after exercise. Of course, if you prefer to eat right after a workout, that's fine. Just know that missing the 30-minute mark won't ruin your progress. Building muscle isn't about perfect timing. It's about consistency, sleep, progressive training, and enough nutrients over time. The protein shake can help, but it's not a race against the clock. Toilet water spins the opposite way in Australia. Toilet water doesn't magically spin the other way just because you're in Australia. But the myth comes from a real scientific principle, and that's where things get interesting. The idea centers around something called the Coriolis effect. This is a force created by the rotation of the Earth. It influences the direction of large systems like ocean currents and weather patterns. In the Northern Hemisphere, storms tend to spin counterclockwise. In the Southern Hemisphere, they spin clockwise. That's the Coriolis effect at work. Now, here's where people make the leap. Since the Coriolis effect changes how hurricanes spin, it must also flip the direction that water swirls down a toilet. Sounds reasonable, but it's not that simple. The Coriolis force is real, but it's incredibly weak when it comes to something as small as a toilet bowl. The shape of the bowl, the angle of the water jets, and even tiny imperfections in the porcelain all play a much bigger role. In other words, your toilet is designed to spin a certain way, and that design doesn't magically reverse itself when you cross the equator. So, while the Coriolis effect does flip directions depending on which hemisphere you're in, it only noticeably affects massive systems that stretch for miles, not a few liters of flushing water. There are physics labs that can carefully demonstrate the Coriolis effect using specially controlled conditions. But a regular toilet, sink, or bathtub simply isn't precise enough. So if you ever hear someone say, toilets spin backward in Australia, just know they're mixing up a scientific concept with a plumbing design. It's a classic case of truth turned myth by oversimplification. Your appendix is a useless evolutionary leftover. For decades, the appendix has been dismissed as a biological relic, a leftover part from our evolutionary past with no real function. It's been called useless, expendable, and even a ticking time bomb just waiting to get infected. But modern science is rewriting the story. Your appendix isn't useless after all. The idea that the appendix has no function came from early anatomists who couldn't find an obvious purpose for it. Because people could survive its removal, they assumed it wasn't doing much. And since it was once larger and more complex in plant-eating ancestors, it was labelled a vestigial organ, a remnant of a digestive system we no longer needed. But recent research has revealed that the appendix plays a subtle but important role in your immune system and gut health. It acts as a safe house for beneficial bacteria, especially after illness. When your gut flora gets wiped out by diarrhea or infection, the appendix helps repopulate your intestines with healthy microbes. It's like a biological reset button for your digestive system. The appendix also contains lymphoid tissue, which plays a role in the development of white blood cells and immune function, especially early in life. That doesn't mean it's essential. Many people live healthy lives without one, especially after appendicitis. But calling it useless ignores what we now understand. Evolution doesn't always discard what's no longer needed. Sometimes it repurposes things, or preserves subtle helpers we once overlooked. So while the appendix might not be the star of the show, it's not deadweight either. It's a quiet contributor to your internal ecosystem, misunderstood for years, but far from pointless. Ostriches bury their heads in the sand. It's a scene many people can picture. An ostrich, startled by danger, shoves its head into the ground and pretends the world isn't there. But here's the thing. Ostriches don't actually do that. The idea that ostriches bury their heads in the sand is a myth. It's been around for a long time, possibly because from a distance, an ostrich lowering its head to the ground can look a bit like it's trying to disappear. But in reality, that behavior is something else entirely. Ostriches are the largest birds on Earth, and they're also pretty fast, able to run up to 40 miles per hour. When threatened, they usually run away. If escape isn't possible, they may crouch low to the ground to blend in with the terrain. From a distance, this can give the illusion that their head has vanished beneath the dirt. But it hasn't. So where did the myth come from? One likely explanation is nesting. Ostriches dig shallow holes in the ground to lay their eggs, and they'll often put their heads near or into these nests to turn the eggs using their beaks. This behavior may have looked, to early observers, like head burying. Over time, the idea stuck. Also, unlike some animals, ostriches don't dig burrows, and they don't store food underground. There's no practical reason they'd ever need to bury their heads at all. But because the visual is memorable, and because it fits into a broader metaphor of avoiding problems, the image took hold in popular culture. In reality, ostriches are alert, strong, and surprisingly defensive when they need to be. They don't stick their heads in the sand. But thanks to an old misunderstanding, they've been living with that reputation ever since. Closing apps saves battery life on your phone. You've probably been told to close your apps to save your phone's battery. It sounds logical. Fewer apps running must mean less power used. But on most smartphones today, that advice doesn't actually help, and it can even make things worse. Here's how it works. Modern phones are designed to manage apps in the background very efficiently. When you swipe away an app, you're not really shutting it down in the way you might think. In many cases, the app is already frozen by the operating system, paused in memory, and using almost no power. It's just sitting there, waiting quietly in case you return. Now here's the twist. Manually closing these apps forces the phone to work harder the next time you open them. It has to completely reload everything from scratch, instead of just picking up where you left off. That loading process actually uses more energy than letting the app stay suspended. Of course, there are exceptions. If an app is actively misbehaving, constantly updating your location, playing audio, or running background tasks, then yes, force closing it might help. But for the average user hopping between texting, social media, and email, closing apps is mostly a waste of effort. Apple and Android engineers have both said the same thing. Their systems are built to manage multitasking automatically. In fact, obsessively swiping away apps can make your phone slower and drain more battery over time. So while it may feel satisfying to clean house, closing your apps doesn't really extend your battery life. In many cases, it does the opposite. What helps more? Lowering screen brightness, turning off unnecessary notifications, and letting your phone handle multitasking the way it was designed to. If you cut an earthworm in half, both parts survive. Chop an earthworm in half, and you'll get 2 living worms. At least, that's what a lot of people believe. It sounds like nature's little trick, like these creatures are just built to bounce back from anything. But in reality, that's not quite how it works. Earthworms do have a remarkable ability to regenerate, but it's not a full-body miracle. If you cut an earthworm somewhere behind its head, there's a chance the front half can survive. That's the part with the brain, most of the vital organs, and the mouth. Under the right conditions, it might even grow a new tail over time. But the tail end, the part without the brain, doesn't have the tools to rebuild a new head. It usually just dies. Even for the half that does survive, it's not guaranteed. Regeneration depends on the species of worm, the exact location of the cut, the environment, and even the worm's age. Some species can regenerate more easily than others, and even then, they don't always succeed. It's a slow, energy-consuming process that can take weeks, and if the worm is stressed, infected, or exposed to harsh conditions, it may not recover at all. This myth likely stuck around because people see both halves moving after a cut. Earthworms have a simple nervous system, and the tail end may twitch or squirm on reflex for a while. But movement doesn't equal survival. It's just leftover muscle activity, not a sign of life continuing. So no, cutting a worm in half doesn't give you two worms. You might get one very lucky survivor, but the other half is out of luck. It's biology, not magic. And while earthworms are impressive in their own right, they don't quite pull off the myth. Cats purr only when happy. A cat curling up in your lap and purring might seem like a clear sign of happiness, and often it is. But the idea that cats only purr when they're content doesn't tell the whole story. Purring is more complex than it looks. It's a low-frequency vibration produced by the laryngeal muscles, and cats do it in a variety of situations. Yes, they purr when they're relaxed, cozy, and getting attention. That's the most familiar context. But cats also purr when they're anxious, frightened, or even in pain. One of the most surprising examples. Cats have been observed purring at the vet during labor or when injured. In these cases, the purring isn't a sign of happiness. It's more likely a self-soothing behavior, similar to how humans might hum or talk to themselves under stress. Some researchers also believe that the vibrations may play a role in healing, possibly helping to reduce pain, improve breathing, or even stimulate tissue repair. The frequency of cat purrs, usually around 25 to 150 Hz, happens to overlap with frequencies used in physical therapy for bone and muscle healing. Kittens start purring just a few days after birth, even while nursing. It's thought to be a way to communicate with their mother. I'm here, I'm okay. And adult cats might use it for more than just comfort. Some studies suggest cats may also purr strategically to get food or attention. It's subtle, but cats have been shown to adjust the tone and frequency of their purrs to appeal to their humans more effectively. So while a purring cat might be perfectly happy, it's not always a sign of joy. Sometimes it's a form of communication. Sometimes it's a coping mechanism. And sometimes it's just one more mystery in the world of cats. You have to forgive to heal. You've probably heard the phrase, you have to forgive to heal. It sounds reasonable, but the truth is, healing and forgiveness aren't the same thing, and one doesn't always depend on the other. Forgiveness usually means letting go of resentment towards someone who hurt you. It's often framed as a personal gift you give yourself, not the person who wronged you. The idea is that holding on to anger will only cause more pain, and that forgiveness sets you free. For some, that can be true, but for others, the process isn't so straightforward. Healing is the act of recovering, mentally, emotionally, or physically, from an experience that caused pain. And while forgiveness can be part of that process, it isn't always necessary. Some people heal through understanding or by creating distance. Others heal by setting firm boundaries or by rebuilding trust in themselves after betrayal. Forgiveness is just one possible route, not a requirement. In some cases, the pressure to forgive can actually slow things down. When someone's been deeply hurt, being told they should forgive might feel dismissive or rushed. It suggests that healing is incomplete without it, even when a person has found peace in other ways. And it's worth noting that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, excusing, or reconciling. You can acknowledge harm, choose not to forgive, and still move forward with your life. Healing can happen through reflection, support, therapy, or time, whether or not forgiveness ever enters the picture. The belief that forgiveness is the only way to heal oversimplifies how people process pain. It can help, yes, but it's not a universal rule. People recover in all kinds of ways, and healing doesn't always look like letting someone off the hook. Sometimes it just means choosing what's best for you and sticking to it. Napoleon was short. Napoleon Bonaparte is one of the most famous military leaders in history, and for some reason, he's also one of the most famously short. But here's the catch. Napoleon wasn't actually that short. The idea that he was unusually small is more myth than fact. At the time of his death in 1821, Napoleon was measured at about 5 feet 2 inches. But that measurement was recorded using French inches, which were longer than British inches. When converted properly, his height was around 5 feet 6 or 5 feet 7 by today's standards. That was average for a European man of the early 1800s. So where did the short Napoleon story come from? A big part of it comes down to political propaganda. During his reign, Napoleon's enemies, especially the British, used caricatures and cartoons to mock him. They often exaggerated his physical size, showing him as a tiny man with a big temper. It was a way to undermine his authority and portray him as overcompensating for a lack of stature. Another reason this myth stuck around is his association with the Imperial Guard. These elite soldiers were often much taller than average, so when Napoleon stood among them, he could appear shorter by comparison. But standing next to tall bodyguards doesn't actually make someone short. It just makes the bodyguards tall. There's also something called the Napoleon complex, a term used to describe people who act aggressively to make up for being small. It's based on the same false idea. The problem is, it links personality traits to a physical characteristic Napoleon didn't even have. The story of Napoleon's height is a good example of how repetition and popular culture can distort basic facts. He wasn't unusually short, but the myth has been repeated for so long, it's become more famous than the truth. Sharks can't get cancer. Sharks are often seen as nearly indestructible. They've been around for hundreds of millions of years, have incredibly tough skin, and are top predators in the ocean. Somewhere along the way, this reputation gave rise to a popular belief: sharks can't get cancer. But that's not actually true. The myth likely started with early scientific interest in shark cartilage. In the 1990s, some studies suggested that shark cartilage might have properties that could slow the growth of blood vessels in tumours. That sparked a wave of interest in the idea that sharks were somehow immune to cancer. Supplement companies ran with it, selling shark cartilage as an anti-cancer product, and the myth spread far beyond the research. But when scientists actually looked into it, they found that sharks can and do get cancer. In fact, tumours have been found in several species of sharks, including great whites and hammerheads. Some had growths on their organs or skin, just like in other animals. So while cancer may not be common in sharks, it definitely isn't impossible. The truth is, no animal is completely immune to cancer. Sharks may have certain biological traits, like efficient DNA repair or unique immune responses, that help reduce their cancer risk. But those aren't superpowers, just natural adaptations that scientists are still working to understand. The myth probably stuck around because it felt like it fit the image people already had of sharks. Tough, mysterious, and almost untouchable. But nature is rarely that simple. Sharks are remarkable creatures, but they're not invincible. And the idea that they're cancer-proof is more science fiction than science fact. Reading faster is always better. Speed reading sounds like a superpower. The promise of flying through books, absorbing knowledge faster, and saving time is tempting. But the idea that faster reading is always better, that's not quite how it works. Reading faster often comes at a cost. When you rush through a page, you may miss the subtleties, the tone, the structure, the deeper meaning behind the words. Your brain might register the words themselves, but comprehension tends to drop. It's kind of like skimming a movie by watching only the trailer. You get a general idea, but the richness is gone. Many speed reading techniques rely on cutting out things like subvocalization. That's when you mentally hear the words as you read them. But for most people, that's a natural part of how the brain processes language. Skipping it can reduce how well you actually understand or retain what you've read. This doesn't mean everyone should read slowly. It depends on what you're reading and why. If you're scanning headlines or reviewing a familiar document, moving quickly makes sense. But if you're tackling something new, complex, or emotionally layered, like a novel, a scientific paper, or a legal agreement, slowing down helps you process it more deeply. Studies show that comprehension tends to peak at moderate reading speeds, somewhere between slow and fast. Past a certain point, trying to speed up can actually backfire, making it harder to remember what you've read. Reading isn't a race, it's a tool, and using that tool effectively means knowing when to pause, reread, or just let an idea sink in. Fast reading has its place, but better doesn't always mean quicker. Sometimes, slowing down is exactly what helps something stick. You only fall in love once. The idea that you only fall in love once is one of those romantic beliefs that sounds poetic, but doesn't quite hold up in reality. It's often based on the notion that there's just one true love for each person. And if you lose that, nothing else will ever compare. But human emotions and relationships are more complex than that. Love isn't a one-time event. It's a psychological and emotional experience that can happen more than once, often in very different forms. The love you feel as a teenager might be impulsive and overwhelming. Later in life, love might feel steadier, built on shared experiences and trust. Each version can be real, even if it looks completely different. Studies in psychology show that our brains are capable of forming deep attachments multiple times. The chemical processes involved in love, like dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin, don't just switch off after one relationship. They respond to new connections, new bonds, and new forms of intimacy. People who've gone through breakups, divorce, or even the loss of a partner often find themselves falling in love again. It may not replicate the first experience, but that doesn't make it less valid. Emotional growth, life circumstances, and personal maturity all shape how love evolves over time. The idea that you only fall in love once might feel comforting or nostalgic, but it doesn't reflect the full range of human experience. Love isn't limited to a single moment or person. It's a capacity, something that can return, take different shapes, and still feel just as real. So while the first time might leave a strong impression, it's not the only time. Love, like people, grows, changes, and sometimes starts all over again. Talent beats practice. Some people seem to be born with it. A natural ear for music, an effortless sense of rhythm, or the ability to draw lifelike portraits by age 10. It's easy to look at them and think, talent wins. But the idea that talent automatically beats practice is more misleading than it sounds. Talent is real. Some people do start with a head start. Their brains might process patterns faster, their bodies might be naturally coordinated, or their memory might retain information more easily. These advantages can make learning certain skills feel smoother in the early stages. But early advantage doesn't guarantee long-term success. Practice, on the other hand, builds something talent alone can't: consistency. Repetition refines technique, strengthens memory, and increases confidence. A talented beginner might outshine others at first, but without practice, that edge quickly dulls. Meanwhile, someone who practices deliberately, breaking down skills, correcting mistakes, and improving steadily, can often surpass those who rely on raw ability alone. Research backs this up. In many fields, from sports to music to academics, those who put in consistent, focused effort tend to outperform others over time. The 10,000-hour rule may not be exact, but it highlights a basic truth. Mastery comes from repetition, not just talent. There are exceptions, of course. Some skills are heavily influenced by genetics, like height in basketball or lung capacity in swimming. But in most areas, the difference between good and great isn't how talented you are. It's how often and how intentionally you show up to improve. So while talent can give you a head start, it's practice that determines how far you actually go. Skill isn't fixed at birth, it's built, 1 hour at a time. You can't use your phone during a thunderstorm. You're inside your house, a thunderstorm rolls in, and someone says, "Put your phone down. Lightning might strike you." It sounds dramatic, but the idea that using your phone during a thunderstorm is dangerous is mostly a myth, especially if you're indoors and using a cordless mobile device. Let's clear something up. Lightning is incredibly powerful and unpredictable, but cell phones themselves don't attract lightning. The myth likely started as a misunderstanding of other, more legitimate safety concerns, like using a corded landline during a storm. Landlines are connected to physical wires, and those wires can conduct electricity from a lightning strike directly into your body. That's real, and it's happened. But mobile phones, they're not plugged into the wall. They run on batteries and don't provide a direct pathway for lightning to travel. So if you're using a smartphone indoors, away from any metal plumbing or electrical wiring, it's perfectly safe. Outside is a different story. During a thunderstorm, the danger comes from being exposed, not from the phone. If you're standing in an open field or under a tree while talking on your phone, you're at risk, but not because of the phone. You'd be at risk even without it. The confusion may also come from the fact that lightning injuries involving phones have been reported, but in most of those cases, the person was outside and the phone wasn't the cause. It just happened to be in their hand. So no, you don't have to put your phone in airplane mode every time it rains. Just stay indoors, stay away from plumbing and wired electronics, and you'll be fine. Your phone isn't a lightning rod. It's just another myth that's spread like wildfire, or maybe static. You can tell someone's personality by their handwriting. Big loops mean you're emotional. Tiny letters mean you're shy. Slanted writing reveals your level of empathy. These are the kinds of claims made by graphology, the belief that you can analyze someone's handwriting to understand their personality. It sounds intriguing, almost like a psychological X-ray. But the science behind it? It just isn't there. Handwriting analysis has been around for centuries, and in some circles, it's been treated like a serious tool for hiring, profiling, or even matchmaking. But when researchers have tested the claims of graphology under controlled conditions, the results have been consistently underwhelming. There's no reliable link between handwriting and stable personality traits like extroversion, openness, or emotional stability. Sure, your handwriting can reflect temporary states like stress, fatigue, or even what kind of pen you're using. Someone writing in a hurry might have messier script. Someone with arthritis might write shakily. But that's not personality, that's context. Graphology often works like a horoscope. It uses vague, general statements that feel personal, but apply to almost anyone. People are naturally drawn to patterns and meaning, especially in something as personal as their own handwriting. That's part of what makes the myth so appealing. Now, forensic handwriting analysis, used to verify documents or detect forgeries, is a different field entirely. That's about comparing samples, not reading someone's soul through their signature. So while handwriting may say something about your mood or motor control, it doesn't reveal the inner workings of your mind. Your script is not a psychological fingerprint. It's just how you learned to write. The next time someone tries to size you up from your handwriting, take it with a grain of ink. You have a soulmate out there. The idea of having a soulmate, a single perfect person meant just for you, is one of the most popular beliefs about love. It sounds romantic, even comforting. But the reality behind it is more complicated than it seems. The term soulmate suggests that somewhere out there is one person who's your ideal match. The assumption is that if you find this person, love will be easy, automatic, and lasting. But human relationships don't work that way. They're shaped by effort, communication, timing, and a lot of real-world variables that don't fit into the idea of destiny. Psychologists point out that believing in soulmates can actually cause problems. If you assume the right relationship should feel perfect from the start, you might give up when things get hard. Or you might keep searching endlessly, thinking the person you're with must not be the one if any conflict arises. In contrast, people who see relationships as something you build, rather than something you find, tend to have longer lasting and more satisfying partnerships. Compatibility isn't fixed. It evolves over time. Two people can grow into each other through shared experiences, honesty, and mutual respect. That doesn't mean anyone could work with anyone else, but it does mean that a perfect fit isn't always something you stumble upon. It can be something you create. Cultural beliefs, movies, and even some dating apps push the soulmate idea because it's an easy narrative. But in real life, love is less about magical destiny and more about how two people choose to show up for each other over time. The belief in soulmates might make love feel more special, but it can also distract from what truly makes relationships work. Chameleons change color to match anything. Chameleons have a reputation for being nature's shapeshifters, known for their ability to instantly match the color of whatever they're standing on. But that popular image isn't quite accurate. While it's true that chameleons can change color, they don't do it to blend into every possible background like a real-life camouflage machine. Their color changes are more about communication and temperature regulation than disappearing into the scenery. For example, a chameleon might turn a brighter color to signal aggression, or a darker tone to absorb more heat from the sun. The science behind it is pretty fascinating. Chameleons don't change color by swapping out pigments like ink in a printer. Instead, they have special cells in their skin called iridophores, which contain microscopic crystals. These crystals reflect light in different ways, depending on how they're spaced. When a chameleon changes its skin tension, the spacing of these crystals changes, and that shifts the color we see. So rather than adjusting to match every rock, leaf, or object they touch, chameleons shift colors based on their mood, surroundings, and body temperature. A calm chameleon may look green to blend in with foliage, while one that feels threatened might flash yellow or red to appear more intimidating. The background might play a role in their overall appearance, but it's not the main driver. The idea that chameleons can match any background like a high-tech invisibility cloak is more fiction than fact. Their color changes are impressive, but they follow a set range of patterns based on biology, not magic. It's one of those cases where the real story is actually more interesting than the myth. Learning styles determine how you learn. Some people say they're visual learners. Others swear they learn best by listening. It sounds reasonable. After all, we all have preferences. But the idea that your brain is hardwired to learn better through one style, like visual, auditory, or kinesthetic input, doesn't actually hold up under scientific scrutiny. The concept of learning styles became popular in the 1990s, with the idea that tailoring lessons to a student's preferred style would improve their ability to retain information. Schools and workplaces jumped on the trend. But when researchers began testing this idea, they didn't find the expected results. Matching instruction to a person's claimed learning style didn't consistently lead to better outcomes. What does seem to matter more is the nature of the material being learned. For instance, learning how to identify paintings might naturally benefit from visual input. But understanding a musical rhythm or learning to pronounce a foreign word might rely more on auditory practice. In other words, the content often determines the best method, not the learner's personal label. That doesn't mean preferences are meaningless. If someone enjoys reading more than listening, they might stick with a task longer if it's presented that way. But preference isn't the same as performance, and relying too heavily on learning styles can actually limit someone's growth. It might discourage people from developing skills in other areas, or trying new ways to learn. Instead of putting ourselves into neat boxes like visual learner or auditory learner, it's more effective to use a mix of approaches based on what we're trying to learn. Flexibility, not fixed style, turns out to be the real advantage. If something is natural, it's automatically safe. If a label says all natural, a lot of people instantly assume it's safer, healthier, or better. But natural doesn't automatically mean harmless. That's a common myth, and it can actually lead to dangerous decisions. Plenty of things found in nature are incredibly toxic. Poison ivy is natural, but rubbing it on your skin will definitely leave a mark. Arsenic, mercury, and cyanide, all natural elements, and all extremely harmful to the human body. Nature isn't filtering things for your safety. It just exists. The idea that natural equals good is more of a marketing angle than a scientific truth. When it comes to food and medicine, the word natural doesn't follow a strict legal or scientific definition. In many countries, it simply means that something wasn't heavily processed or doesn't contain artificial ingredients. But it doesn't speak to safety, effectiveness, or dosage. For example, raw almonds contain cyanide-producing compounds. They're technically natural, but that doesn't mean they're safe to eat in large amounts unprocessed. On the flip side, synthetic doesn't always mean bad. Many life-saving drugs are synthetic versions of compounds originally found in nature. Aspirin, for instance, is a lab-made version of a chemical found in willow bark. It's been refined and controlled to ensure consistent results and minimize risks. The real question with anything you consume, whether natural or not, is how it behaves in your body. What are the side effects? How much is too much? Has it been tested? In short, natural can be a useful descriptor, but it isn't a guarantee of safety. What matters most is understanding what something actually does, not just where it came from. Left-handers die younger. For years, there's been a rumor floating around that left-handed people die younger than right-handed people. It sounds dramatic, and on the surface, a few older studies seem to support it. But the truth is far less alarming and a lot more interesting. The idea came from research in the late 1980s that claimed left-handers die on average about 9 years earlier. That's a big difference, and naturally, it raised eyebrows. But when researchers dug deeper, they found something unusual. The early study didn't account for how left-handedness was treated in the past. In earlier generations, especially before the mid-20th century, left-handed children were often forced to switch. Teachers, and even parents, trained kids to write with their right hand, believing it was the proper or more civilized way. As a result, older left-handers were underrepresented in data because many had been reclassified as right-handed early in life. So when researchers looked at age data by handedness, it looked like there were fewer elderly left-handers, which led to the wrong conclusion. Modern studies that control for this bias show no consistent link between being left-handed and having a shorter lifespan. Left-handed people face some unique challenges, like tools and machinery designed for right-handed users. But these don't translate into lower life expectancy in any reliable way. So where did the myth come from? Mostly a combination of flawed data and cultural misunderstanding. Being left-handed might come with quirks, like smudging your ink while writing, but it doesn't come with an expiration date. In the end, left-handedness is just a variation in brain wiring. And like eye color or height, it doesn't determine how long you live. Lightning strikes are rare. Lightning might seem like a rare and dramatic event, something you only see in movies or during a heavy summer storm. But in reality, lightning strikes are a lot more common than most people think. Every single day, lightning bolts strike the Earth over 8 million times. That's about 100 strikes per second. Globally, lightning is constantly flashing somewhere, especially in tropical regions where the air is warm and moist, perfect conditions for thunderstorms to form. So why do people think lightning strikes are rare? It's mostly because personal encounters with lightning are uncommon. The odds of being struck in a given year are about 1 in 1.2 million in the US. That sounds low, and it is, but that's just one person over 1 year. Over a lifetime, the odds are closer to 1 in 15,000. And that's assuming you're not doing anything risky, like hiking during a thunderstorm or playing golf in open fields. Lightning is more dangerous than it looks. It's not just a bright flash in the sky. A bolt can heat the air to 5 times hotter than the surface of the sun, and it moves at about 220,000 kilometers per hour. When it strikes, it can cause serious burns, cardiac arrest, or death. It can also spark wildfires, damage homes, and knock out power lines. Despite this, lightning often doesn't get taken seriously. People continue outdoor activities during storms, assuming it's unlikely to hit them. But the truth is, while the chance of any one person getting struck is low, lightning itself is not rare. It's constant, powerful, and often underestimated. Understanding just how often it occurs is the first step in staying safe when the sky starts to rumble. You can't refreeze thawed meat. It's a common rule in kitchens. Once you thaw meat, you can't refreeze it. But that's not entirely true. The idea likely started with good intentions, mainly to prevent food poisoning. When meat is left out too long at room temperature, bacteria like Salmonella and E. coli can multiply quickly. If you refreeze it after that, those bacteria won't be killed. They'll just go dormant, waiting to wake up again when the meat is thawed next time. But here's the key. If the meat was thawed safely in the fridge and hasn't been sitting out for hours, then it's usually fine to refreeze. The USDA even says so. The risk isn't from refreezing itself. The risk comes from how the meat was handled while thawing. Of course, refreezing does have some downsides. It can change the texture. Ice crystals form when you freeze meat, and if you freeze, thaw, and freeze again, those crystals can damage the muscle fibers. That's why meat that's been refrozen often feels mushier or drier once it's cooked. The quality might take a hit, but the safety doesn't, as long as the rules were followed. Let's say you take some chicken out of the freezer and leave it in the fridge overnight. The next morning, your dinner plans change. If the chicken stayed cold, below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, you can pop it back in the freezer. What you shouldn't do is thaw it on the counter, forget about it for hours, then toss it back in the freezer. That's where the danger comes in. The bottom line is, refreezing meat isn't automatically unsafe. It depends on how it was thawed, how long it's been out, and whether it's been kept cold. Handle it right, and it's okay to change your dinner plans. Your stomach growling means you're hungry. You're sitting in a quiet room, and suddenly, gurgle. Your stomach growls, and someone nearby jokes, "Sounds like you're hungry." It's a familiar moment, and the conclusion feels obvious. But the truth is, stomach growling isn't always about hunger, and it happens even when you're full. The growling sound, officially called borborygmi, comes from your digestive system. Specifically, it's the result of your intestines and stomach muscles contracting to move food, gas, and fluids through the digestive tract. This movement, called peristalsis, happens all day long, not just when you're hungry. So why does the noise often seem louder when you haven't eaten? Because your stomach is emptier, and an empty space amplifies sound. It's like drumming on a hollow container versus a full one. The same activity is happening, but the acoustics are different. Also, about 2 hours after your stomach empties, your brain triggers a series of contractions called the migrating motor complex, a cleanup wave that clears out lingering food and debris. That's when growling tends to kick in. It's part of your body's routine maintenance, not necessarily a cry for snacks. And yes, hunger can coincide with these contractions, which is why people often connect the two. But the growling itself isn't a reliable signal of when you need to eat. And it's definitely not proof that your body is starving. So next time your stomach rumbles in public, don't be embarrassed. And don't assume it's a hunger alarm either. Sometimes it's just your digestive system going about its business, with a bit more noise than usual. If your ears are burning, someone's talking about you. Your ears start to feel hot and tingly, and someone nearby jokes, "Someone must be talking about you." It's a common expression, light-hearted, familiar, and usually followed by a laugh. But behind the phrase is a long-running myth that connects a physical sensation with social gossip. The belief dates back to ancient Rome, where writers like Pliny the Elder recorded the idea that burning ears were a supernatural signal, your body's way of alerting you to unseen chatter. According to the tradition, if your right ear burned, the talk was good. If it was your left, not so much. But let's bring it back to the real world. Medically speaking, ear warmth happens for a few simple reasons: changes in blood flow, temperature, or even mild irritation. Stress or embarrassment can make your ears flush, just like your cheeks. And sometimes it's just heat or pressure from lying on one side too long. There's no biological mechanism that connects ear temperature to other people's conversations. The brain can't pick up on gossip happening somewhere else and translate that into a physical signal in your ears. It just doesn't work that way. So why does this idea stick around? Because it's fun, harmless, and it taps into a deep desire to believe in hidden connections, that our bodies can sense something invisible. It turns an ordinary body sensation into a moment of intrigue. And culturally, it's become more of a playful superstition than a serious belief. In the end, burning ears are nothing more than a quirky side effect of how your body regulates heat or reacts to emotion. But the myth still gives people a reason to pause, laugh, and maybe wonder who's saying what behind their back. All snakes are venomous. Not every snake you see is out to bite you with venom. In fact, the idea that all snakes are venomous is simply not true. There are over 3,000 species of snakes in the world, and only a small percentage of them are actually venomous. Most snakes don't rely on venom to survive. Instead, they use other strategies like constriction, ambush hunting, or simply avoiding conflict altogether. The ones that are venomous, like cobras, vipers, or coral snakes, are well known for their bite, and rightly so, but they don't represent the whole group. Many common snakes people encounter, like garter snakes, rat snakes, or pythons, pose no serious threat to humans. Pythons, for instance, are non-venomous constrictors. They kill their prey by wrapping around and squeezing, not by injecting toxins. And even some snakes with mild venom, like certain colubrids, aren't dangerous to people. Their venom is adapted for hunting small animals, not for self-defense against large mammals. So where did the myth come from? It likely comes from fear. Snakes have long been misunderstood, and their quick movements, forked tongues, and sharp fangs make them easy to villainize. When people don't know how to tell the difference between species, they often assume the worst. Over time, that fear turned into a blanket belief that any snake could be deadly. But the truth is far more nuanced. Yes, venomous snakes exist, and some can be lethal. But they are outnumbered by non-venomous ones, many of which are essential to local ecosystems, helping control pests and maintain balance. So no, not all snakes are venomous. The vast majority just want to be left alone. And understanding that can help shift fear into a little more respect, and maybe even curiosity. Washing your face with hot water opens pores. It's one of the most common skincare tips around. Wash your face with hot water to open up your pores and help clean them out. It feels good, sounds logical, and even shows up in spa routines with steamers and towels. But here's the thing. Pores don't open or close like doors, and hot water doesn't control them. Pores are small openings in the skin where hair follicles and oil glands live. They don't have muscles, which means they can't actively open or close. What hot water does is make your skin feel softer, increase circulation, and possibly loosen up oil or debris trapped inside the pores. But it doesn't open them in any mechanical way. The idea probably stuck because warm water and steam can help loosen buildup and make extractions easier, especially for blackheads. But saying that the pores are open is just an oversimplification. It's not about movement. It's about softening what's inside. On the flip side, cold water doesn't close your pores either. It might tighten the skin temporarily and reduce redness. But again, the pore size stays the same. In fact, using water that's too hot can actually do more harm than good. It can strip your skin's natural oils, cause irritation, and damage the outer barrier, especially for people with sensitive or dry skin. So the best skincare advice: use lukewarm water, not hot. It's gentle, effective, and won't disrupt your skin's natural balance. And remember, clean skin comes from consistent care, not steam tricks. Your pores aren't doors, they're part of your skin. And they're not swinging open just because the water feels warm. Vikings wore horned helmets. When most people picture a Viking, they imagine a big warrior with a bushy beard and a horned helmet. But that helmet, it's pure myth. There's no real evidence that Viking warriors ever wore horned helmets in battle. In fact, archaeologists have never found a single Viking helmet with horns attached. The helmets that have been recovered, like the Geirmundbu helmet found in Norway, are practical, made of iron and built for protection. No horns, no flair, just function. So where did the horned helmet image come from? It actually started centuries after the Viking Age ended. In the 1800s, during a wave of romantic nationalism in Europe, artists and writers wanted to dramatize the past. They painted Vikings as wild, barbaric figures, and the horned helmet became a theatrical way to emphasize that image. The look caught on, especially in opera. Richard Wagner's costume designers used horned helmets in his Norse-inspired operas, and the visual stuck. From there, it spread into popular culture. Comic books, movies, Halloween costumes, they all ran with the horned helmet idea. It was eye-catching and instantly recognizable, even if it had no historical accuracy. Real Viking warriors were intimidating in their own right, but their gear was designed for survival, not style. Helmets were often conical or rounded, with a nose guard and sometimes chainmail. Horns, if used at all, were for drinking or ceremonies, not headwear. So the idea of horned Viking helmets is more costume than history. It tells us more about modern imagination than it does about the real Norse people who lived, sailed, and raided over 1,000 years ago. Christopher Columbus discovered America. In school, many people learn that Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1492, but that version of history skips a lot of important facts. When Columbus landed in the Bahamas in October 1492, he wasn't the first human to reach the Americas. Millions of indigenous people had already been living across North and South America for thousands of years. Their civilizations included complex cities, languages, farming systems, and trade networks long before Europeans arrived. Columbus also never set foot on what is today the mainland United States. His voyages took him to islands in the Caribbean and parts of Central and South America. He believed he had reached the edges of Asia, not a new continent. So, technically, he didn't discover America. He stumbled onto land already known and inhabited. Even from a European point of view, Columbus wasn't the first. Norse explorer Leif Erikson reached what's now Newfoundland, Canada, around the year 1000, nearly 500 years earlier. Archaeological sites like Lanceau Meadows back this up with physical evidence of Viking settlement. So why does Columbus get the credit? His voyage marked the start of sustained European contact with the Americas, which eventually led to colonization. For centuries, textbooks framed that moment as a discovery, overlooking the people who were already here. Today, historians are more precise. They recognize that Columbus's journey had a major impact, but they also acknowledge the rich histories that existed long before his arrival. It's not about erasing Columbus from the story. It's about telling the whole story more accurately.